"You goose," replied Annie. "We shall be in Zermatt by then, and I will make an arrangement with the shopman to keep the necklace out of the window until we are off. Now I have everything as clear as daylight. You must coax and coax as you know how for the beautiful necklace, and you must get your Aunt Henrietta, if possible, to pay £40 for it. That is the only thing to be done, but it just needs tact and resource. I shall be present with my tact and resource. I will allow you to be alone with your aunt tomorrow morning, and then, when I think she has scolded you long enough, I will come innocently into the room, and you must start the subject of the necklace, then trust to me for the rest. Mrs. Priestley is asked in this letter, which will never go, for the one with the £30 will take its place, to send the full items of her account to Zermatt. She will do so, and your aunt will be so much in love with you for your economy, and so full of remorse at having accused you of extravagance, that she will probably give you another necklace when there, which one you can keep. The main thing, however, is to get through this little business tomorrow. Now go to bed and to sleep, Mayflower, and never say again that your Annie does not help you out of scrapes. Chapter 18. Dawn at Interlaken. The next day dawned, fresh, clear, and beautiful, with that exquisite quality in the air which so characterizes Interlaken. Priscilla, when she opened her eyes in the tiny bedroom which was close to Annie's and just as much under the roof, although no one thought her unselfish for selecting it, sprang out of bed and approached the window. The glorious scene which lay before her with the majestic young Frau caused her to clasp her hands in a perfect ecstasy of happiness. The pure delight of living was over her at that moment. It was permeating her young being. For a time she forgot her present ignoble position, the sin she had sinned, the deceit in which she had had such an important share. She forgot everything but just that she herself was a little unit in God's great world, a speck in His universe, and that God Himself was over all. The girl fell on her knees, clasped her hands, and uttered a prayer of silent rapture. Then more soberly she returned to her bed and lay down where she could look at the ever-changing panorama of mountain and lake. They were going on to Zermatt on the following day, and Zermatt would be still more beautiful, a little higher up, a little nearer those mountains which are as the delectable mountains in Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, past the power of man to describe. Prisky owned to herself, as she lay in bed, that she was glad she had come. It was not going to be nice at first, she thought. But this repays everything. I shall remember it all for the rest of my days. I am not a bit good, I know, I have put goodness from me. I have chosen ambition, and the acquiring of knowledge, and the life of the student, and by an appointment of some worth where I can enjoy those things which I thirst for. But whatever is before me, I am never going to forget this scene. I am never going to forget this time. It is wonderfully good of God to give it to me, for I am such a wicked girl. Annie and Mabel are wicked too, but they could never have done what they did without my help. I am, therefore, worse than they, much worse. A servant knocked at the door and brought in Priscilla's first breakfast. The man laid the coffee and rolls on a little table by the girl's bedside, and Priscilla sat up and enjoyed her simple meal, eating it with appetite. When she had come to the last crumb, a sudden thought forced itself on her mind. What is the matter with Annie? How strangely Annie looked at me last night. Why has she taken each a violent antipathy to me? What have I done to annoy her? The thought had scarcely come to Priscilla when she heard a light tap at her door, and in reply to her "Come in," Annie entered. I thought you would be awake and having your breakfast, Prisky. Annie tripped lightly forward. She seated herself on Prissy's bed. Isn't it a glorious morning? Said Prisky. Isn't the view lovely? I suppose so, replied Annie in an indifferent tone. But, to tell the truth, she added, I have not had time either to think of the beauty of the morning or the beauty of the view. You surprise me, said Priscilla. I can never think of anything else. Why, we are just here for that, she continued, fixing her great dark grey eyes on Annie's face. Just here for that, laughed Annie. Oh, you oddity. We are not here for anything of the kind. We are staying at Interlaken because Lady Lushington thinks it fashionable and correct to spend a little time here in the autumn. From Zermatt, I understand, we are going to Lucerne, and then presently to the Italian lakes, that is, Mabel and Lady Lushington are going to the Italian lakes. Of course, you and I will have to go back to the dreary school. Oh, but the school is not dreary, said Priscilla. I am glad you find it agreeable, it is more than I do. But I thought you loved your school. It is better than my home, that is all I can say, but as to loving it, Annie cried, I love the world, and the ways of the world, and I should like some day to be a great, fine lady with magnificent clothes, and men, in especial, bowing down to me and making love to me. That is my idea of true happiness. Well, it is not mine, said Priscilla. She moved restlessly. How white you are, Prisky. You don't look a bit well. I am quite well. Why do you imagine I am not? You are so sad, too. What are you sad about? As Annie boldly uttered the last words, Priscilla's face underwent a queer change. A sort of anguish seemed to fill it. Her mouth quivered. I shall never, never be quite happy again, Annie Brooke, and you know it. Oh, you goose, said Annie. Do you mean to say you are letting your little fiddle-faddle of a conscience prick you? It is the voice of God within me. You dare not speak of it like that. Annie settled herself more comfortably on the bed. She faced her companion defiantly. I know what you are about to do, she said. What do you know? And if you do it, continued Annie, and turn traitor to those who have trusted you, to your own schoolfellows, you will be the meanest Judas that ever walked the earth. Priscilla's face was very white, almost as white as death. Leave my room, please, she said. Whatever I have done at your instigation, and whatever I do in the future is my affair and no one else's. Leave the room immediately. I won't until you make me a promise. I will make you no promise. I have had too many dealings with you in the past. Leave the room, please. Priscilla spoke with such dignity that Annie, cowed and almost terrified, was forced to obey. She went out on the landing. Priscilla, for the time being, had completely routed her. She scarcely knew how to act. Of one thing I am certain, she said to herself when she reached the shelter of her own tiny room, which had not nearly such a magnificent view of the mountain and lake as Priscilla's chamber, but was a little bit larger, and therefore suited Annie better. Of one thing I am indeed certain, said Annie to herself, Priscilla means to make grave trouble, to upset everything. Oh, well, I am glad I know. Was I ever wrong in my intuitions? I had an intuition that Priscilla was going to set her foot on all my little plans. But you shan't, dear old Pri. You will go back to England as soon as ever I can get you there, and trust Annie Brooke for finding a way. This clinches things. As soon as ever I have settled Mrs. Priestley and the affair of the necklace I must turn my attention to you, Prisky. There is no earthly reason, now I come to think of it, why everything should not be managed within the scope of this little day. Why should Prisky accompany us to Zermatt? I am sure she is no pleasure to any one with those great, reproachful eyes of hers, and that pale face, and those hideous garments that always remind me of poor consumptive Susan Martin and her silly poems. Yes, I think I can manage that you, dear Prisky, return to England tomorrow, while Lady Lushington, Mabel, and I proceed to Zermatt. Your little schoolfellow Annie Brooke, I rather imagine, is capable of tackling this emergency. Accordingly, Annie dressed swiftly and deftly, as was her way, coiling her soft golden hair round her small but pretty head, allowing many little tendrils of stray curls to escape from the glittering mass, looking attentively into the shallows, for they certainly had no depths, of her blue eyes, regretting that her eyelashes were not black, and that her eyebrows were fair. The day was going to be very hot, and Annie put on one of the fresh white cambric dresses which Lady Lushington's maid kept her so well supplied with. Then she ran downstairs, as was her custom, for she always liked to be first in the breakfast salon in order to look over the morning's post. A pile of letters lay, as usual, by Lady Lushington's plate. These Annie proceeded to take up one by one and to look at carefully. A lady, a certain Mrs. Warden, who had made the acquaintance of Lady Lushington since she came to the hotel, came into the breakfast room unobserved by Annie, and noticed the girl's attitude. Her table was, however, situated in a distant part of the room, and Annie did not know that she was watched. Amongst the pile of letters she suddenly saw one addressed to herself. It had evidently been forwarded from the Grand Hotel in Paris, and was written in a bold, manly hand. Annie felt, the moment she touched this letter, that there was fresh trouble in store for her. She had an instinctive dislike to opening it. She guessed immediately that it was written by her cousin, John Saxon. Still, there was no use in deferring bad tidings, if bad tidings there were, and she would do well to acquaint herself with the contents before Mabel or Lady Lushington appeared. It was one of Lady Lushington's peculiarities always to wish to have her coffee and rolls in the breakfast salon. She said that lying in bed in the morning was bad for her figure, and for this reason alone took care, whatever had been the fatigues of the previous day, to get up early. Priscilla, strange as it may seem, was the only one of the party who had her rolls and coffee in her own room. But that Priscilla liked to rush through her breakfast, and then day after day to go out for a long ramble all alone, whereas Lady Lushington preferred to linger over her meal and talk to those acquaintances whom she happened to meet and know in the hotel. Annie glanced at the clock which was hung over the great doorway, guessed that she would have 2 or 3 minutes to herself, and, taking a chair, seated herself and opened John Saxon's letter. It was very short and to the point, and Annie perceived, both to her annoyance and distress, that it had been written some days ago. Dear Annie, it ran, I promised to let you know if your uncle was worse and if your presence here was a necessity. I grieve to say that it is. He is very far from well, and the doctor is in constant attendance. Your uncle does not know that I am writing this letter, but then, I am sorry to tell you that he has not often known during the last few days what is passing around him. He is quite confined to his bed, and lives, I believe, in a sort of dream. In that dream he is always talking of you. He often imagines that you come into the room, and over he begs that you will hold his hand. There is not the least doubt that he is pining for you very much, and it is your absolute duty to return to him at once. I hope this letter will be forwarded from the Grand Hotel in Paris, as you have forgotten, my dear Annie, to give us any further address. I am, therefore, forced to send it there. If you will send me a wire on receipt of this, I will manage to meet you in London, and in case you happen to want money for your return journey, which seems scarcely likely, I am enclosing 2 5-pound notes for the purpose. Do not delay to come, for there is imminent danger, and in any case your place is by the dear old man's bedside. I am, dear Annie, your affectionate cousin, John Saxon. Annie had barely read this letter and crushed it with its precious 2 5-pound notes into her pocket before Lady Lushington and Mabel made their appearance. Mabel looked rather white and worried. Lady Lushington, on the contrary, was in a good humor, and seemed to have forgotten her vexation of the previous day, but Annie's scarlet face and perturbed manner could not but attract the good lady's attention. What is the matter, Miss Brooke? Is anything troubling you? Oh no, at least, not much, said Annie. She reflected for a minute, wondering what she could safely say. The fact is, Uncle Maurice, the dear old uncle with whom I live, is not quite well. He is a little poorly, and confined to bed. Then you would, of course, like to return to him, said Lady Lushington, speaking quickly and with decision. Oh, said Annie hastily and scalding herself with hot coffee as she spoke, that is the very last thing Uncle Maurice wishes. It is quite a passing indisposition, and he is so glad that I am here enjoying my good time. I will wire, dear Lady Lushington, if you will permit me, after breakfast, and give my uncle and the cousin who is with him our address at Zermatt. Then if there should be the slightest danger I can go to him immediately, can I not? Of course, child, said Lady Lushington, helping herself to some toast, but I should imagine that if he were ill your place now would be at his bedside. Oh, but it would distress him most awfully, that is, of course, unless you wish to get rid of me. You know we don't wish that, Annie, said Mabel. Certainly we don't, said Lady Lushington in a more cordial tone. You are exceedingly useful, and a pleasant, nice girl to take about. I have not half thanked you for all the help you have given me. If you can reconcile it to your conscience to remain while your uncle, who must stand in the place of a father to you, is ill, I shall be glad to keep you, so rest assured on that point. I can certainly reconcile it to my conscience, said Annie, breaking a roll in two as she spoke, for, you see, it is not even as though my Uncle Maurice were alone. My cousin can look after him. Oh, you have a girl cousin. I did not know that. Not a girl, he is a man. His name is John Saxon. What? Said Lady Lushington, her eyes sparkling, Mr. Saxon, the young Australian. Why, I met him in London last year. What a splendid fellow he is. I have seldom met anyone I admired so much, and they say he is exceedingly rich. I want him to come over to London and enjoy himself for one of the seasons. I could get him no end of introductions. He is with my uncle now, said Annie, speaking rather faintly, for it seemed to her as though entanglements were spreading themselves round her feet more and more tightly each moment. Doubtless he is a good nurse, said Lady Lushington. She then turned the conversation to other matters. After breakfast Annie went out and sent her telegram. In this she gave the address of the hotel where they were going to stay at Zermatt, at the same time saying that she much regretted, owing to the grave complications, that she could not leave Lady Lushington for a few days. She spent a fair amount of John Saxon's money on this telegram, in which she begged of him to give her love to Uncle Maurice, and to say that if he really grew worse she would go to him notwithstanding that business which was involving all the future of her friend. The telegram was as insincere as her own deceitful heart, and so it read to the young man, who received it later in the day. A great wave of color spread over his face as he read the cruel words, but he felt that he was very near the presence of death itself, and not for worlds would he disturb the peace of that departing saint who was so soon to meet his Maker face to face. I will not wire to her, he said to himself, but if the old man still continues to fret, and if the doctor says that his longing for Annie is likely to shorten his days, I shall go to Zermatt and fetch her home myself. Nothing else will bring her. How could dear old Mr. Brooke set his affections on one like Annie? But if he can die without being undeceived as to her true character, I at least shall feel that I have not lived in vain. Meanwhile, as these thoughts were passing through the mind of a very manly and strong and determined person, Annie herself was living through exciting times. She was not without feeling with regard to her uncle. After a certain fashion she loved him, but she did not love him nearly as well as she loved her own selfish pleasures and delights. She was sadly inexperienced, too, with regard to real illness. Her belief was that John Saxon had exaggerated, and that dear, kind Uncle Maurice would recover from this attack as he had done from so many others. Now she had much to attend to, and forced herself, therefore, after the telegram had gone, to dismiss the matter from her mind. As Annie had predicted, Lady Lushington did call Mabel into her private sitting room soon after early breakfast on that eventful day, and did speak very seriously to her with regard to Mrs. Priestley and her bill. I don't pretend for a single moment, said Aunt Henrietta, that I am poor, and that I am unable to meet a bill of 3 times that amount, but I do not choose you to be wantonly extravagant, Mabel, and it is simply an unheard of and outrageous thing that a schoolgirl should spend £70 on dress during one short term. You know I invariably pay your dressmaker at the end of each term. Now this bill is more than double the amount of any that I have hitherto paid for you. Will you kindly explain why it rises to such enormous dimensions? Mabel was very much frightened, and stammered in a way that only increased her aunt's displeasure. What is the matter with you, May? Can't you speak out? Are you concealing anything from me? Oh no, no, indeed, Aunt Henny, indeed I am not. Only the fact is, I am quite certain Mrs. Priestley must have made a mistake. What is all this about? Said Annie Brooke, who entered the room at that moment. Oh, we were talking business. I beg your pardon. Shall I go away? No, don't, Miss Brooke, said Lady Lushington rather crossly, you are really wanted here to help to clear matters. Seeing that I am honored by the possession of so clever a niece as Mabel, I wish she would not on every possible occasion act the fool. She is as stupid over this outrageous bill as though she were an infant. Well, Mabel, said Annie, you know quite well that you had some nice dresses, hadn't you? Yes, said Mabel, who seemed to have a wonderful amount of added courage now that Annie had appeared on the scene. Then she nimbly quoted a description of the beautiful gowns which Annie had falsely described the day before. Most unsuitable for a schoolgirl, said Lady Lushington. And where are they, may I ask? Oh, I left them at school, said Mabel. Worse and worse, you seem to have lost your head. Poor May, said Annie, no wonder. You must know, Lady Lushington, that after your letter came May nearly worked herself into a fever to get that literature prize. She could think of nothing else. She did so long to be with you, didn't you, May? Indeed I did, replied Mabel. Well, that is gratifying, I suppose, said Lady Lushington, although I am by no means certain, my dear May, that I return the compliment. My impression is that another year at that excellent school would do you no end of good. Well, you lost your head trying to get that prize. But how could that fact affect Mrs. Priestley's bill? I mean, said Mabel, that I forgot about packing my dresses and taking them away, and I had not an idea that my bill amounted to that. In fact, she added, meeting Annie's eyes, I am quite positive that Mrs. Priestley has made a mistake, and that you will find the bill. Here she hesitated. I, said Annie, happen to know pretty well what May's lovely dresses cost. Oh, you know, Lady Lushington, we thought 'em perfectly ruinous in price, we schoolgirls, for our best dresses usually come to from £3 to £4. But May's, oh, some of hers were up to 10 or 12 guineas. Even so, however, I don't think May can owe Mrs. Priestley more than £40. Then the woman's a thief and a cheat, said angry Lady Lushington. I think, perhaps, said Annie, speaking in her gentlest tones, it might be fairest to let her explain. She has probably, oh, she has such numbers of customers, put down some items that don't belong to Mabel in her account. Well, we shall see, said Lady Lushington. You posted that letter, didn't you, Miss Brooke? Then she added, hastily and without waiting for an answer, I shall be glad if it is so. I make no objection to paying £40, but I do draw the line at 70. Thank you, Auntie, thank you so much, said Mabel, running up to her aunt and kissing her. Now don't, my dear. You disturb the powder on my cheek. Do sit down, don't be so impulsive. I know what you are wanting to do, I know what is in your head, you silly Mabel, said Annie at this juncture. Lady Lushington looked up. What is it? She asked. Oh, said Annie, it is that necklace, that wonderful, amazing bargain. Lady Lushington pricked up her ears. She could not, and all her friends were aware of the fact, ever resist a bargain. She would have gone from one end of London to the other to secure the most useless old trash if she was firmly convinced in her own mind that she had to get it as a bargain. She now, therefore, sat up with sparkling eyes, and Mrs. Priestley and her bill were as absolutely forgotten as though they had never existed. There are no bargains at Interlaken, was her next remark. Oh, are there not? Said Annie. Mabel and I know something very different from that. What is it, my dear? What is it? Well, said Annie, it was I who found it out. I showed it to May yesterday. You know Zick the jeweler in the little high street? Of course, his shop is full of rubbish. There is a necklace there which is not rubbish, said Annie, and the best of it is that he is not a bit aware of its value himself. A necklace? What sort? He can't be aware of its value, said Annie, which is very surprising, for these Swiss are so sharp, but I can assure you I was taught to recognize the beauty of good pearls, and there are some lovely ones in that necklace. Now nothing in all the world would be so becoming to May as real, good pearls, and this necklace, it belonged to an old French marquise, who was obliged to sell it, poor dear. To get ready cash. Zick paid, oh, he would not tell me what, but he is offering it for a mere bagatelle. My dear Miss Brooke, a bagatelle? Yes, only £40. Nonsense, said Lady Lushington. £40. All the contents of his shop are not worth that sum. I dare say you are right, said Annie, by no means abashed, with the exception of the necklace. But now, you are a judge of jewels, aren't you? Well, I rather flatter myself that I am. I saw 2 or 3 ladies from this hotel looking at the necklace yesterday. I was dying to tell you, but I had not an opportunity. I am so awfully afraid it may be snapped up. Do come at once and look at it. If they are really fine pearls, said Lady Lushington, and the old French noblesse were noted for the beauty of some of their gems, it would be exceedingly cheap at £40. But then, of course, the whole thing is a hoax. Oh, do come and see. It would be such a beautiful present for May. She can't wear ornaments until she is presented, said Lady Lushington. Well, but think what even a string of pearls would cost, you know, in Bond Street. Of course I know I could not get anything decent under £100. You say £40. Of course, the thing could be reset. Would you really like it, May? Like it, said Mabel, trembling. I'd adore it, Auntie. Well, said Lady Lushington, if your conjecture, Miss Brooke, with regard to Mrs. Priestley is correct and Mabel has really only spent £40 on her dress, I should not mind doing a deal for the necklace, but as things are, said Annie, I should not be one scrap surprised if Mrs. Warden has the necklace already in her possession. It is certain to be bought up immediately, for it is a real bargain. In that case, said Lady Lushington, I had better, Mabel, ring for Parker. I will just walk down with you to Zick's. You can both come with me. Annie skipped as she ran up to her attic bedroom. Mabel, it may be mentioned, had a very nice room on the same floor as her aunt. Prisky was out and all alone among the mountains. So much the better. Uncle Maurice, in his room which faced west, was listening for a light footstep that did not come, for the pressure of a little hand that was not present, for the love that he imagined shone out of blue eyes but which in reality was not there. Annie forgot both Prisky and Uncle Maurice. Things were going swimmingly. How clever she was. How abundantly Mabel would thank her and love her and help her all the rest of her days. Lady Lushington, accompanied by the 2 girls, went to Zick's, and soon began the fierce war of words over the necklace. She perceived at once that Annie was right, and that the pearls were a very great bargain even at £40, but she would not have been a true bargain hunter if she did not try to bring Zick to accept lower terms. Unfortunately for her, however, 2 other ladies had been in the shop that morning, had examined the necklace, and had promised to call again. Lady Lushington, in the end, was afraid of losing it. She paid the money, and the necklace became her property. Oh May, you are in luck, said Annie. Lady Lushington has bought this for you. Mabel looked longingly at the little box in her aunt's hand. "Take it, child," said Lady Lushington impulsively. "Be sure you don't lose it. Let Parker pack it for you tonight with your other small trinkets, but on no account wear it until after your presentation. Really, those pearls are so fine that I think they might be reset for the occasion. It is my strong impression that I have only given half the worth of that necklace to Zik. What an idiot the man must be to sell it so cheap." Chapter 19. A profitable transaction. Annie Brooke was the sort of girl who was sure to be popular wherever she went. She had already made many friends in the Hotel Bellevue at Interlaken. Amongst these was a quaint old gentleman with shaggy hair, deep-set eyes, a much hooked nose, and a decidedly Jewish appearance. Few people were attentive to the old man, and he used to be glad when Annie came and sat next him in the big lounge after dinner, and listened to his rather rambling and rather meaningless talk. But Annie Brooke was the sort of person who does nothing without intent. She never met anyone without trying to learn something with regard to that person's peculiarities, that person's past, and, if possible, that person's present history. Now Mr. Manchuri was a dealer in gems, and it darted through Annie's fertile brain as she was returning to the hotel with Lady Lushington and Mabel that she might do a little stroke of business both for herself and her friend if she showed the precious necklace to him. The more she thought on this, the more did this idea fascinate her. It would be very, very much better than taking the necklace back to Zik or offering it for sale to some other dealer at Interlaken. The jewelers there were not so clever with regard to the true value of gems as was Mr. Manchuri, and besides, it was quite on the cards that they might exhibit the necklace in their windows for sale during the afternoon of that same day, and there was also a possibility that Lady Lushington, who was always rather wayward and uncertain in her movements, might postpone going to Zermatt for a day or two. In short, it would be very much safer to consult Mr. Manchuri with regard to the necklace. He was going to return to England that very afternoon. If he took the necklace with him all would be safe, but Annie did not dare to confide her thoughts to Mabel. She was certain Mr. Manchuri would not betray her, but she had to act warily and with tact. Now Prisky had gone for a long walk into the mountains, and when she came back she was very tired. She went accordingly to sit in the lovely shady garden which was one of the principal features of the hotel. She chose a comfortable rustic seat under a wide spreading tree, and sat for some time with a book on her knee lost in thought. By and by Annie entered the garden. She saw Priscilla, and was much annoyed. She knew that it was Mr. Manchuri's custom to smoke in the garden before lunch. She meant to join him and have a pleasant little talk. But the most shady seat, the seat, in fact, which he generally occupied, was now filled by the, to Annie, ungainly figure of Priscilla Weir. "Oh dear me, Priscilla," said Annie, pausing when she saw her friend, and looking at her with a great deal of exasperation. "Yes," said Prisky, "what is the matter? I want to sit just where you are." "Well, I suppose you can, there is room for two." "But there isn't room for three," said Annie. "Three," said Priscilla. "Who is the third?" "Oh, never mind," said Annie, "I suppose we'll find another seat. It is Mr. Manchuri, he is going to England, you know, today. He is such a nice old man, and I did think I could send a little present by him as far as London, and then it could be posted to dear old Uncle Maurice. I wanted to give him a special message about it. But there, never mind. I will go in if I am in the way," said Prisky. She rose hastily and went towards the house. She felt that Annie was becoming almost unendurable to her. Such a queer, sore sensation was in her heart that she almost wondered if she could live through the next term at Mrs. Littleton's school in the presence of this girl so devoid of principle. But then, where were Priscilla's own principles? What right had Priscilla to upbraid another when she herself was so unworthy? She crushed down the dreadful thought, and went back into the house feeling limp and miserable. Meanwhile Mr. Manchuri walked slowly down the garden in his meditative, cautious fashion, never hurrying in the very least, and gazing abstractedly at a view which he did not in the least admire, for he had no eyes for the really beautiful things of nature. Nevertheless he considered the strong, sweet air of the Swiss mountains good for him, and as such was the case, was satisfied with his surroundings. Presently he caught sight of Annie's white frock. He liked Annie Brooke, she was a pretty little thing, very good-natured and amusing. He thought to himself how much nicer she was than any other girl in the hotel. She had no nonsensical airs about her, and could listen to an old man's maunderings without showing the slightest sign of weariness. Her eyes were very blue, too, and her hair golden. He did not consider her pretty, no one ever thought Annie Brooke quite pretty, but then she was charming, and had a way of making a man feel at his very best while he talked to her, and she did not object to his smoking. He accordingly made his way as straight as an arrow from the bow to the comfortable seat where Priscilla had been reposing, and which Annie had left vacant for him. Annie was seated on a far less comfortable chair herself. She was looking straight before her, her hands lying idle in her lap, her hat slightly pushed back. She did not appear to notice Mr. Manchuri until he was close to her side. But when he said, "Hello, Miss Brooke," she looked up, and a happy smile parted her childish lips. "Oh, now, this is nice," she said. "I was wondering if I should see you before you went." "I am not going until late this evening," was the answer. "I thought you were going this afternoon." "No, I have decided to travel by night. It is too hot for day traveling at present." He sank into a seat and began to pull at his pipe vigorously. Annie gave a gentle sigh. "What is the matter?" he asked. She looked at him, glanced round her, and then, dropping her voice to a whisper, said, "I wonder if I might confide in you." "Of course you may, Miss Brooke," he said. "But it is," said Annie, "a most sacred confidence. I mean that if I tell you, you must never tell anybody else." "I am very honored, I am sure," said Mr. Manchuri. "Now what is this confidence, young lady? You will respect it," said Annie. "Here is my hand on it," he said, and he laid his wrinkled hand for a minute in her little white one. "Then it is just this," said Annie. "I have a dear, dear uncle in England, Uncle Maurice. He is a clergyman, he is awfully good and sweet, and he is not at all well, and he is not rich, although he has enough. I am most anxious to send him a little present, something all from myself. Now I happen to get this today," and she took a box from where it lay concealed in the folds of her dress. "I got this today at Zick's, the jewelers. You must not ask me what I paid for it. I assure you it was not a great deal, but I am under the impression that it is worth far more than Zick has any idea of. I want to sell it in order to send a little present to dear Uncle Maurice, and you are such a judge of gems and precious stones of all sorts. May I show it to you? The fact is, I got it as a great bargain, but if you could tell me what I ought to ask for it, it would be such a help in disposing of it again. Do you think you could, and would?" Mr. Manchuri gave Annie a long glance. It was the first very observant glance that he had given her. Hitherto he had simply regarded her as a nice, well-mannered, pleasant little girl, who did not mind amusing an old man with little nothings of conversation and little scraps of local news, but now it seemed to him all of a sudden that he saw something more in her face. "And how," he asked after a pause, "how is it, Miss Annie Brooke, that you happen to know that I am a judge of gems and precious stones?" Annie did not expect this question, and in consequence she colored very vividly. After a pause she said, "I am always fond of putting two and two together, and don't you remember that evening when you told me the wonderful story of the Duchess of Martinborough's bracelet, and about the ring that was stolen and sought for afterwards by the Secret Service people?" "Yes, I remember quite well." "Well, go on. I thought what a lot you knew about those things. Don't you?" "Bless your heart, child," he said, "I am in the trade myself, I have made a pretty snug fortune in it. Yes, I can glance at your little bargain and tell you, if you like, whether it is a bargain or not. And you remember your promise, you will never tell anyone." "Honor bright," was his answer. She then put the box into his hand. He opened it, and took out the old necklace with its pearls of various sizes and different shapes, and its very quaint, old-world setting. Annie glanced at him and saw a subtle change creep over his face. He had hitherto regarded the whole thing as a joke. Annie Brooke, child as she was, could not possibly know a bargain when she saw it, and those Swiss fellows were as sharp as knives and never let anything good escape them. And yet, here was something of real merit. Those center pearls were distinguished, round and smooth and of the most exquisite color. He dangled the thing lightly in his hand. All the tricks of the trade, all that which had made him the rich old man what he was, rushed quickly through his brain, and yet he looked again at Annie Brooke. For the life of her, Annie could not keep the eagerness out of her eyes. "Is it a bargain, or is it not?" she said. "Have I been fooled about it? Will you tell me in strict confidence what you gave for it?" he asked. Annie had hoped he would not put this question to her. "I was a little mad, I think," she said. "I gave my all for it." "That tells me nothing. What is your all?" £40, she said in a choked sort of voice. "Were you not rather unwise to part with your last penny?" "You don't understand," said Annie, who, having at last declared a part of the truth, felt better able to go on. I have studied pearls a great deal, and Uncle Maurice, dear Uncle Maurice, has taught me their true value and something of their history, and I guessed that this was really cheap, and thought I could sell it for more. By Jove, said Mr. Manchuri, you are the sharpest girl I ever saw. How old are you? 17, said Annie. God help the man who marries you, said Mr. Manchuri under his breath. What did you say? Asked Annie. Nothing, my dear. Of course I admire your cleverness. Well, you have come to the right person. I will give you £100 for this necklace, there, now. And you won't say anything about it, said Annie, who felt at once faint and delighted, overpowered with joy, and yet subdued by an awful weight of apprehension. Nothing to anyone in this hotel. But the thing is a curio, and I shall probably sell it for double what I give you. I do not conceal anything from you, Miss Annie Brooke. You might try forever, and you would find it difficult to get your £40 back. But I, who am in the trade, am in a different position. Had I gone to Zik before you, I would have probably bought the thing for £30 and thought no shame to myself for doing so. But I won't cheat a young lady, particularly such a very clever young lady, and you shall have your £100 at once. Here, I have notes on my person. You would prefer them to a cheque? Oh yes, please. Annie trembled with joy. Mr. Manchuri counted out 10 £10 notes, and Annie gave him the quaint pearl necklace. She then lingered a little longer trying to talk on indifferent matters, but her interest in the old Jew was gone, and, as a matter of fact, she did not want to see him any more. As to the old man himself, he felt that he hated her, but he was glad to have made a good stroke of business, although he was very rich. That was always worth something. He would in all probability clear £150 on the necklace, which would more than pay for his trip abroad and for the benefit he had derived from the air of the Swiss mountains. Annie went into the house, rushed up to Mabel's room, and, taking 3 £10 notes out of her pocket, said exultantly, "There, I have done it. Now who is clever?" "Oh, you are," said Mabel. "But where did you sell it, and to whom? We must keep Aunt Henrietta from going to any of the shops today." "Oh, we will easily manage that," said Annie. "She is going to have a little drive after lunch, and I am going with her, trust me. We must get to Zermatt tomorrow. Now I am going to write a long letter to Mrs. Priestley enclosing this. I shall barely have time before Dejeuner." When that day Annie Brooke did sit down to Dejeuner, she considered herself a remarkably wealthy young woman, for she had in her possession nearly £80, every one of which she intended to keep for her own special aggrandizement. And Mrs. Priestley was paid in full, with a long explanatory letter desiring her emphatically to send an account to Lady Lushington which would only amount to £40. Annie was exceedingly pleased. The color of excitement bloomed on her cheeks, her eyes looked quite dark. At these times she was so nearly pretty that many people remarked on her and turned to look at her again. She was in her wildest, most captivating mood, too, and Priscilla looked by her side both limp and uninteresting. If only Priscilla would go. Her very face was a reproach. Annie wondered if she could accomplish this feat also. Mr. Manchuri could take her to England. What an excellent idea, if Annie could only work it. "I have had everything else I wanted today," thought the girl, "and if I can do this one last thing I will see the pinnacle of my success reached." "You will come for a drive, won't you?" said Annie, bending towards Lady Lushington as the tedious meal of Dejeuner was coming to an end. Lady Lushington yawned slightly. "Oh, I don't know," she said, "the heat is so great that I have not energy for anything. I wonder if I ought to travel tomorrow." "Oh yes," said Annie, "it will be cooler at Zermatt." "That is true, but the journey. We have taken our rooms in the hotel, have we not?" said Annie. "Well, that is just it, I am not sure. I telegraphed this morning to the Beau Séjour, but have not had a reply yet. I insist on staying at the Beau Séjour. There is no hotel like it in the place." "There are such a lot of us, of course," said Annie, "but Prisky and I do not mind sharing the tiniest little room together, do we, Pri?" Here she glanced at Priscilla. Priscilla looked up. "I don't want to be unpleasant," she said, "but I certainly should like a room to myself." "Of course, my dear," said Lady Lushington. Dear, I must consult with Parker. There's a room for me, a room for Mabel, a room each for you two girls, that makes 4, and Parker's room, 5. You two girls would not by any chance mind sleeping in another hotel, would you?" Here she looked first at Annie and then at Priscilla. "Certainly not," said Annie. "I do not mind anything." Priscilla was quite silent. Just then one of the waiters appeared with a telegram. It was to Lady Lushington. She opened it. There were only 4 bedrooms available at the Beau Séjour. Annie spoke impulsively. "I tell you what," she said. "I won't be in the way, I won't. I will go back to England tonight. I can go with Mr. Manchuri, that funny old Jew gentleman whom I have been so friendly with. I know he will let me travel with him. It is just too bad, Lady Lushington, you must let me. I have been, oh, so happy, and it will be a cruel disappointment to go, but I will. Yes, I will go." "Seeing that your uncle is ill, perhaps," began Lady Lushington. "Oh, please don't think that it is on account of that. Uncle Maurice constantly has these attacks. He is probably as well as ever by now, but it is just because I won't crowd you up." "But, Annie," said Mabel in a troubled voice, "you know I can't live without you." "It is very awkward indeed," said Lady Lushington, "very awkward. The fact is, I can't very well spare you, you are of great use to me." Priscilla rose from the table. She had scarcely touched anything during the meal. "I think I know what Annie Brooke means," she said. "She means that one of us 2 girls is to offer to go back, and she naturally does not intend to go herself." "But I offered to go." "How cruel you are," said Annie. "I will go, too," she added, pouting and looking at once pretty and petulant. "Yes, Lady Lushington, I will go, Mabel, I can't help it. You are my very dearest honest friend, but I won't crowd you up. You will have Prisky." "No," said Priscilla mournfully, "I am no use. I don't think at present I love people, and I can't talk much, and I can't wear," she hesitated, "the dresses that other people wear. I will go. I have had a beautiful time, and I have seen the mountains. It is something to have had even a glimpse of the higher Alps, they are like nothing else. A little disappointment is nothing when one has had such great joy. I will go tonight if Mr. Manchuri will let me accompany him." "It does seem reasonable, Miss Weir," said Lady Lushington. "We can't stay on here, for our rooms are let, and I won't go anywhere at Zermatt except to the Beau Séjour. As to one of you girls sleeping out, it cannot be thought of, although I did propose that 2 of you might, that is, together, but there seem to be difficulties. You have not been very happy with us, have you, Miss Weir?" "You have been the cause of great happiness to me, and I thank you from my heart," said Priscilla. "Well, my dear, I will of course pay your fare back. I hope we may meet again some day. Then that is settled. Annie, please go at once and wire that we will engage the 4 rooms, and, who will see Mr. Manchuri and arrange with him to let Priscilla accompany him to England." "I will do both," said Annie. She hastily left the salle à manger and ran through the great lounge with a sort of skipping movement, so light were her steps, and so light and jubilant her heart. The old Jew did not make any demur when he was told that the tall, slender young lady was to accompany him home. "I will look after her," he said. "Don't thank me, please, Miss Brooke, I don't suppose that she will be the slightest trouble." Priscilla went up to her room, flung herself on her bed, and wept. Chapter 20. A Confession and a Friend. It is quite true that very clever people are sometimes apt to overstep the bounds of reason and prudence, and whether all that befell Annie Brooke and all that retribution which she so richly merited would have fallen so quickly and so decisively on her devoted head had she not been anxious to get rid of poor Priscilla must remain an unsolved question. But certain it is that Priscilla Weir's departure in the company of Mr. Manchuri was the first step in her downfall. Annie, with £80 in her pocket and with all fear of Mrs. Priestley laid at rest, felt that she had not a care in the world. But Priscilla, when she stepped into the first-class carriage which was to convey her en route for England, was one of the most perplexed and troubled girls who could be found anywhere. Mr. Manchuri, with all his faults, his love of securing a bargain, his sharpness, had a kindly heart. He saw that the girl was in trouble, and took no notice at all of her for more than an hour of the journey. It so happened, however, that very few people were returning to England so early in the season, and the pair had the railway carriage for a long time to themselves. When Priscilla had sat quite silent for a considerable time, her eyes gazing straight out into the ever-gathering darkness, Mr. Manchuri could contain himself no longer. He had scarcely ever glanced at Priscilla Weir when she was at the hotel. She was not pretty, she was not showily dressed, she was a queer girl. He knew that she belonged to Lady Lushington's party, but beyond that he was scarcely aware of her existence. Now, however, he began to study her, and as he did so he began to see marks of what he considered interest in her face. What was more, he began to trace a likeness in her to someone else. Once, long ago, this queer, dried-up old man had a young daughter, a daughter whom he loved very passionately, but who died just when she was grown up. The girl had been tall and slender, like Priscilla, and strangely unworldly and fond of books, and, as the old man described it, good at stargazing. He did not know why the memory of Esther, who had been in her grave for so many years, returned to him now. But, be that as it may, Priscilla, without being exactly like Esther, gave him back thoughts of his daughter, and because of that he felt inclined to be kind to the lonely girl. So, changing his seat which he had taken at the farther end of the carriage, he placed himself opposite to her and said in a voice which she scarcely recognized, "Cheer up now, won't you? There is no good in fretting." Priscilla was startled at the kindness of the tone. It shook her out of a dream. She turned her intensely sorrowful eyes full upon Mr. Manchuri and said, "I shall get over my disappointment, I am sure, please don't take any notice of me." "But, come now," said Mr. Manchuri, "what are you fretting about? You are going home, I understand." "Oh no, I am not," said Priscilla, "I am going back to school." "Oh, so you are a schoolgirl?" "Yes, sir." "How old are you, my dear?" "I am nearly 17, said Priscilla. Now Esther had been nearly 17 when she died, she was not quite 17. Mr. Manchuri felt glad that Priscilla was not quite 17. "I thought of course, you were going home," he said, "that perhaps you had someone who wanted you very much. Why should you, I wonder, leave Lady Lushington's party? There was not room for all of us at the hotel at Zermatt, so I am going back to England." "But why you?" said Mr. Manchuri. He felt quite angry. How furious he would have been if anyone had treated his Esther like that, and this girl had a voice very like Esther's. "Why you? Why should this be your lot?" "Oh, I don't know," said Priscilla. "Someone had to do it. I see, that little Annie Brooke would not go, for instance, not she is far too clever." "She offered to go," said Priscilla, who would not allow even Annie to appear at a disadvantage. Mr. Manchuri laughed. "There is a way of offering, isn't there, miss? Forgive me, my dear, I have not caught your name." "What is it?" "Priscilla Weir." "I like the name of Priscilla, it is so quaint and old-fashioned. Do you know that I once had a girl called Esther? She was my only child. That is a quaint name too, if you like. Don't you think so? Don't you think that Esther is a very pretty name?" "Very," said Priscilla. "It is a beautiful name," she added, "and that story about Queen Esther is so lovely." "Isn't it?" said Mr. Manchuri. "And my girl was like her, a sort of queenly way about her. Do you know, miss, you don't mind if I call you Priscilla?" "Please do," said Priscilla. "Do you know that in a sort of manner you remind me of my dear Esther? She was darker than you, but she was like you. God took her. Shall I tell you why?" "Please," said Priscilla. She had come back to the present world now, and was gazing, with all her heart in her eyes, at the queer old man. "She was too good for earth," said Mr. Manchuri, "that is why God took her. He wanted her to bloom in the heavenly gardens. She wasn't a bit like me. I am all for money and bargains. I made a rare one today, but I mustn't talk of that. That is a secret. I am a rich man, very rich, and when I die I will leave my money to different charities. I have not kith or kin to leave it to, neither kith nor kin, for Esther is with God and the angels. But, all the same, I can't help making money. It is the one pleasure I have. If a week goes by when I can't turn over a cool 100 or even sometimes 1,000 I am put out and miserable. You don't understand that feeling, do you?" "No, I don't," said Priscilla. "No more did Esther, I could not get it into her. I tried to with all my might, but not one little bit of it would get through that pure white armor she wore, the armor of righteousness, I take it." "Tell me more about her," said Priscilla, bending forward and looking full into Mr. Manchuri's eyes. "I could talk about her forever to you," was the answer, "although, as a matter of fact, I have not mentioned my child's name to a living soul for going on 30 years. It is 30 years since she went to God, and she is as young as ever in the heavenly gardens, not 17 yet, just like you." "Yes," said Priscilla. "It is very interesting," she added. "It seems to me," she continued, "as if I knew now why I am taking this journey, and why God did not want me to see the lovely mountains that surround Zermatt." "You are more and more like Esther the more you talk," said Mr. Manchuri. "She was all for star-gazing and that sort of thing. I take it, that includes mountain-gazing and going into raptures at sunsets and at sunrises, and going into fits at shadows on the hills and lights across the valleys, and little flowers growing in clumps by brooks, and living things that you can see if you look deep into running water, and the songs of birds, and the low hum of insects on a summer evening. After these things, which she liked best of all, she loved books that made her think, and I could not get her to take the slightest interest in what she wore, or in money, bless you. But she was sweet beyond words with children, and with people who were in trouble, and there were girls of her own class in life who adored her. They are elderly women now, oldish, almost, with children of their own, but 2 or 3 of them have called their girls Esther after her, although they don't resemble her one little bit. You are the first girl I ever came across who in the very least resembles her. I wish I could see your face in the light. I love the things she loved, said Priscilla. Hers must have been a most beautiful nature. Then she added fervently, it was very lucky for her that she died. Why do you say that? Said Mr. Manchuri. Lucky for her. Well, perhaps so, for God and the angels and the gardens of heaven must be the very best company and place for one like my Esther, but nevertheless, she would have had a good time down here. No, she wouldn't, said Priscilla stoutly. The world is not made for people like her. Then you don't find the world a good place, said Mr. Manchuri, speaking in an interested voice. Priscilla took a long time before she replied. Then she said very gravely, I don't find the world a good place, I mean the people in it, and I want to say something. Her voice broke and changed. I must say something, please let me. Of course you shall, my dear Priscilla. My dear girl, don't agitate yourself, say anything you like. You have been so kind comparing me to your beautiful child, said Priscilla. But I must undeceive you. Although I love the mountains and the things of nature, and although I cry in my heart for goodness, and although I am the same age as your Esther was when she went away to God, I am not a bit like her, for I am not good. I am wicked. Mr. Manchuri was startled at this statement, which he took to be the exaggeration of a young and sensitive girl. You must not be too introspective, he said after a pause. That is very bad for all young things. Esther was not. She had a beautiful belief in God, and in goodness, and in joy. She was never discontented, never once. If you are not like her in that, you must try to grow like her. I tell you what, you interest me tremendously. You shall come to see me in London, and I will show you Esther's portrait. I can't come, said Priscilla. You talk to me out of your very kind heart, but you don't know. I am not a good girl. I have done something far and away beyond the ordinary bad things that girls do, and I cannot possibly come to you under false colors. If I could, I would be friendly with worldly people, but I am not in touch with them, and good people I can have nothing to do with. So I must stand alone. I shall never see your Esther, I know that, but thank you all the same for telling me about her, and, I shall never forget the picture you have given me of her most lovely character. Mr. Manchuri was considerably startled at Priscilla's words, and in some extraordinary way, as she spoke, the image of Annie Brooke when she looked at him with that crafty expression in her eyes returned to him, and he said to himself, I will get to the bottom of the secret that is troubling the girl who is like my Esther, and I have a very shrewd suspicion that Miss Brooke is mixed up in the affair. Priscilla closed her eyes after she had uttered the last words, as though she were too tired to say any more, and Mr. Manchuri sat and watched her. She had very handsome, long, thick, black eyelashes, and the likeness to his Esther was even more apparent in her face when her eyes were shut than when they were open. The more the old man looked at her, the more did his heart go out to her. It had been for long years a withered heart, a heart engrossed in that most hardening of all things, money-making. To make money just for the love of making it is enough to crush the goodness and frankness out of all lives, and Mr. Manchuri had 20 times too much for his own needs. Still, his excitement over a bargain or a good speculation was as keen as ever, and even now, at this very moment, was he not wearing inside his waistcoat that curious necklace which he had bought from Annie Brooke that day? He would make, after paying the £100 which he had given Annie, at least £150 on the necklace. Yes, he lived for that sort of thing. He had a very handsome house, however, at the corner of Park Lane, and this house was filled with rich furniture, and he had a goodly staff of servants, and many friends as rich as himself came to see him, and he drank the most costly wines and ate the most expensive dinners, and never spent a penny on charity or did one good thing with all his gold. There was one room, however, in that house which was kept sacred from the faintest touch of worldliness. This room contained the portrait of the child who was taken away from him in her first bloom. It was a simple room, having a little white bed and the plainest furniture that a girl could possibly use. There were a few of Esther's possessions lying about, her workbox, her little writing desk, a pile of books, most of them good and worth reading, and Mr. Manchery kept the key of that room and never allowed anyone to enter it. It was the sacred shrine in that worldly house. It was, in short, the heart of the house. But now Mr. Manchery discovered on this midnight journey that that withered heart of his own, which he had supposed to be dead to all the world, was suddenly alive and keenly interested in a girl of the age of his Esther, a girl who absolutely told him that she was not good, and that because she was not good she must stand alone. I will get her secret out of the poor young thing, he said to himself, and what is more, I will help her a little bit for the sake of my Esther. Priscilla was really very tired. She slept a good deal during the night, all of which time they had the carriage to themselves. But in the morning some fresh travellers entered their compartment, and Mr. Manchery had no opportunity of saying a word in private to Priscilla until they were on their way to London. When, however, they had crossed the Channel, the first thing he did was to engage a private coupe on the express train, and soon, as they were whirling away towards the great centre of life and commerce, he was once again alone with his young companion. "Now, my dear," he said, "you will just forgive me for asking you a plain question." "I am sure I will, Mr. Manchery," said Priscilla. "You have been most kind to me." "We shall arrive in London," said Mr. Manchery, "at 5 o'clock. Now, may I ask where you intend to go for the night?" "I will send a telegram to my schoolmistress, Mrs. Littleton, and then take the next train to Hendon," was Priscilla's remark. "But is your schoolmistress at home?" "I do not know, but somebody will be." "Do you want to go back to school in the holidays?" "Not very specially, but I must go, so there is no use talking about it. I felt so bewildered yesterday that I did not send a telegram, as I might have done. But I know the servants can put me up, and it will be all right, and you have been, oh, so kind, Mr. Manchery." "Not at all, my dear Priscilla, not at all. The fact is, I have never enjoyed a journey so much. Your company has given me real pleasure." "And now what do you say?" "Yes," interrupted Priscilla, "to coming to me to my house for a few days, even for a night or so, instead of going back to Hendon." "To your house, Mr. Manchery?" "Yes, my dear, you will have a hearty welcome there, and I assure you it is quite large enough. I have got excellent servants, who will look after you, and you won't see much of me except in the evening, and then perhaps you will cheer me up a bit, and I want to show you what you know, my dear." Priscilla turned first red and then white. "I have told you why I cannot see that," she said. "That is the subject I want to discuss with you more fully. Will you come back with me to Park Lane, and tonight? I am an old man and lonely, and you, my dear little girl, have stirred something within me which has never been stirred for 30 years, and which I thought was quite dead. You won't refuse me, will you? That, indeed, would be a sin. That would be putting a heart back once more into its grave." Priscilla was startled at the words, and still more at the expression in the old face. There was such a hungry, pleading look in the eyes. "Oh no," she said simply, "I am not so bad as that. If you want me like that, I, who am not wanted by anyone else, indeed, I will come." Chapter 21. Confessions. Mr. Manchery was a person who seldom had his soft moods, but he was very kind to Priscilla. She found the house most luxurious, and was allowed to do exactly what she liked in it. The housekeeper, Mrs. Wolfe, petted her a good deal, and the other servants were most respectful to her. She was given a large, luxurious room to sleep in, and was allowed to do what she liked with herself while Mr. Manchery was busy all day long over his business affairs. So one day lengthened into 2, and 2 into 3, and a week passed, and still Priscilla was the guest of old Mr. Manchery. It was a Sunday evening, the first Sunday after her visit, when she and the old man were seated together, and the old man put out his hand and touched hers and said, "There is a dress of Esther's upstairs. It is all grey and long and straight, and belongs to no special fashion, and I believe if you put it on it would exactly fit you, and I think, in this sort of half light, if you came down to me in that dress I should almost believe that Esther had returned." "But I can't wear the dress," said Priscilla, "because of that which I have told you, nor can I see the portrait of your Esther for the same reason." "Now, my dear," said Mr. Manchery, "I won't ask you to wear the dress and I won't show you the portrait of my child until you yourself ask me to do so. But what I do want to say is this, that whatever happens, I am your friend, and as to your having done something that you call wicked, why, there, I don't believe it. What can a young girl who is not yet 17 have done? Why, look at me, my dear. I am as worldly an old fellow as ever lived, and I have made a capital good bit of business while at Interlaken. It is connected with that secret that I hinted to you about when we were on our way back from Interlaken. Mr. Manchuri, said Priscilla, what you have done in your life cannot affect what I have done in mine. I have done a very bad thing. It seems dreadful to me, and, here she looked at him in a frightened way, you attract me very much, she said. You have been so wonderfully kind to me, and the thought of your Esther seems to give me a sort of fascination towards you, and if you will let me I should like to tell you what I have done. Said the old man, rubbing his hands. Now we are coming to the point. You will send me away, of course, said Priscilla, I know that. I know, too, that you will counsel me to do the only right thing left, and that is to make a clean breast of everything to Mrs. Littleton. She is your schoolmistress. Yes. Then it is something you have done at school. That is it. Oh, a schoolgirl offense, a scrape of that sort. My dear young lady, my dear Priscilla, when you come to my age you won't think much of things of that sort. I hope I shall never think lightly of them, said Priscilla, that would be quite the worst of all. Well, out with it now. I am ready to listen. I want you to do more than listen, said Priscilla. She took one of his hands and held it in both of hers. I want you to be Esther for the time being. I want you to judge me as Esther would judge me if she were here. My God, said the old man, I cannot do that. I cannot look at you with her eyes. Try to, won't you? Try to, very hard. You move me, Priscilla. But tell me the story. It implicates other people, said Priscilla. She sank back again in her seat, and in telling you my share in it I must mention no names, but the facts are simply these. I have a great and very passionate love for learning. I am also ambitious. I was sent to Mrs. Littleton's most excellent school by an uncle in the country. He could not very well afford to pay the fees of the school, and his intention was to remove me from it at the end of last term. I ought to tell you, perhaps, that I have a father in India, but he has married a second time and has a young family, and he is very poor. Uncle Josiah is my mother's brother, and he has always done what he could for me. But he is a rather rough, uneducated man. In short, he is a farmer in the southwest of England. Towards the end of the last term I received a letter from him saying that he could not afford to keep me at school any longer, and that I was to come back to him and either help my aunt in the housework, which meant giving up my books and all my dreams of life, or that I was to be apprenticed to a dressmaker in the village. Now both these prospects were equally odious to me. I struggled and fought against them. The suffering I endured was very keen and most real. Then, just when I was most miserable, there came a temptation. By the very post which brought me the dreadful letter from my Uncle Josiah, there came a letter to another girl in the school who was most keenly desirous to leave it. I cannot mention the girl's name, but she was told that unless she won the first prize for literature at the breakup she was to remain for another year. You see, Mr. Manchuri, this was the position. One girl wanted to go, another girl wanted to stay. Now I wanted to stay, oh, so tremendously, for another year at school would give me a chance which would almost have been a certainty of getting a big scholarship, which would have enabled me to go from Mrs. Littleton's school to Girton or Newnham, and from there I could have continued my intellectual life and earned my bread honorably as a teacher. This is quite interesting, said Mr. Manchuri. And what happened? You are still at school, at least, so you tell me. Yes, said Priscilla, I am still at school. I am there because I sinned. How, child? Speak, Priscilla, speak. There was another girl in the school, and she was wonderfully clever. I must not tell you her name. She managed the thing. She managed that the girl who wanted to leave the school should get the prize for literature, and that I should stay for a year longer at Mrs. Littleton's. But how? How could she do it? She was so marvelously clever that she did do it, of course with my connivance. Oh, with your connivance. How? Well, you see, I could write better essays than most girls in the school, and it was arranged, and I consented to give up my essay to the girl who wanted to go, and to allow her to put her signature to it, and I took her essay and put my signature to hers. So she got the first prize for literature and left the school, and I stayed on, my reward being that my fees were to be paid for the ensuing year. That is the wicked thing I have done, and it has sunk into my heart and has made life unendurable. Thank you very much, said Mr. Manchuri. Priscilla bowed her head. The old man started up and began to pace up and down the room. After a time he went up to the girl, just touched her on her bowed head, and said very gently, "We will judge this thing, if you please, in the presence of my daughter Esther." Come with me now to her room, you shall see her. The portrait of her is so good that you will almost feel that you are looking at her living self. Priscilla rose tremblingly. She was weak and exhausted in every limb, but it seemed to her that a powerful hand was drawing her forward, and that she had very little will to resist. Mr. Manchuri took the girl up to a room on the first floor. It was a beautifully large room, but scantily furnished. He lit some candles that had been previously arranged in front of a large picture which stood on an easel. This picture had been painted by one of the great portrait painters of 30 years ago. It was a most speaking likeness, and Priscilla, when first she saw it, started, turned very white, and clasped Mr. Manchuri's hand. "Why, it is I," she said, "it is I. I have seen myself like that in the glass." Mr. Manchuri drew a deep breath of relief. "Didn't I know it?" he said. "Didn't I say that you were like her? And see, she smiles at you. You forgive Priscilla, don't you, Esther? Smile at her again, Esther, if you forgive her." The smile on the young face of the girl who had so long been dead seemed to become more pronounced, more sweet, more radiant. "There," said Mr. Manchuri, "Esther has judged just as God does, I take it, and the thing is forgiven as only God forgives. But what you have to do, Priscilla Weir, is this. You have to put yourself right with your schoolmistress, and in doing so you cannot, in any justice, shield your schoolfellows. I am no fool, dear girl, and I know their names well enough. One of them is that Miss Lushington whom I met at the Hotel Bellevue, and the other, the girl who arranged the plot and carried it through with such cleverness, is no less an individual than my little quondam friend, Annie Brooke. You see, my dear, there is no genius in my making this discovery, for I have heard 'em both talk of Mrs. Littleton's school, and Miss Brooke often entertained me in the most charming way by giving me a minute description of Miss Lushington's talents and how she won the great literature prize. Little did I then guess that I should be so much interested in you, my dear. We will leave Esther now. Come downstairs with me again." Chapter 22. Contrary Influences. Annie's high spirits continued with her during all the somewhat hot journey from Interlaken to Zermatt. She was, in truth, the life of the party, and kept everyone in the best possible humor. Her charm was undoubted, and her apparent unselfishness made her invaluable. Even Parker acknowledged that there never was such an obliging young lady, or such a thoughtful one, as Miss Annie Brooke. Mabel could groan at the heat. Lady Lushington grumble and complain, even Parker herself could give way to insupportable headache, but nothing daunted the unflagging good humor of Annie Brooke. Had she not the eau de cologne handy for poor Parker's head? Could she not chat cheerfully to Lady Lushington and make her laugh, and could she not insist on Mabel's having the seat where she was at once protected from too much draught and yet not exposed to the full glare of the August sun? When they reached the hotel, too, it was Annie who chose, without a moment's hesitation, the one uncomfortable room of the little suite which was set apart for Lady Lushington's party. "Nothing matters for me," said Annie. "I have got unflagging health, and I am so happy," she said. "Every one is so kind to me." "You really are a dear little thing," said Lady Lushington when Annie herself entered that lady's room bearing a cup of tea which she had made from Lady Lushington's own private store, and which smelt so fragrant and looked so good. "Oh, my dear Annie," continued the good lady, "I really must call you by your Christian name. I never did find anyone quite so pleasant before. Now if Mabel had not been such a goose as to get that literature prize, which I verily believe has swamped every scrap of brain the poor girl ever possessed, I could have had you as my little companion for a year. How we should have enjoyed ourselves." "Oh, indeed, how we should," said Annie, a bitter sigh of regret filling her heart, for what might she not have made of such a supreme opportunity? "But," she added quickly, "you would not have known me then, would you? You would never have known me but for Mabel. It is one of the very luckiest things that could have happened to me, Mabel wishing that you might join us," said Lady Lushington. "You are the comfort of my life, you are worth 50 Parkers and 100 Mabels. Yes, is the exact right angle for the pillow, my dear. Thank you so much, thank you, that is delicious, and I think I will have a biscuit. What a glorious view we have of Monte Rosa from the window." "Oh yes," said Annie, "isn't it lovely? By the way, Annie, you are quite sure that Mabel is taking care of those pearls of hers? We have to thank you too, you clever little thing, for discovering them. I am quite under the impression that I have come by a good bargain in that matter." "I am sure you have, dear Lady Lushington, and the pearls are quite safe. I knew you would see to it, dear, you are so thoughtful about everything." By the way, I have already seen on the visitors list the name of a certain Mrs. Ogilvy. If she is my friend, I should like to show her the necklace. Annie felt her heart nearly stop for a minute. Of course you must show it, was her gentle response, and I will see that dear Mabel takes care of the precious things. Well, you can go now, darling, you have made me feel so nice, and this room is delicious. Really, the journey was trying. It is horrible traveling in this intense heat, but we shall do beautifully here. Annie tripped out of the room and went straight to Mabel's. Mabel's room was not nearly as good as the one which Lady Lushington occupied, but still it was a very nice room, with 2 large windows which opened in French fashion and had deep balconies where one could stand and look into the very heart of the everlasting hills. Parker's room was just beyond Mabel's, and Annie's was at the back. It was arranged that Parker should be within easy reach of her mistress and her young lady, and self-forgetful Annie therefore selected the back room. She had no view at all, but then, what did views matter to Annie, who was blind to all their beauty? Mabel was alone. She felt very hot and dusty after her journey, and had just slipped into a cool, white dressing gown. "Let me take down your hair, dear May," said Annie, "and if you sit in that deep armchair I will brush it for you. Isn't it nice here, May?" "Yes," replied Mabel, "I suppose it is, only you have a horrid small room, Annie." "I don't care a bit about that," said Annie. "I am not going to be much in it except to sleep, and when one is asleep any room suffices. But, May, I want to talk to you." "What about?" said May. "Anything fresh." Annie carefully shut the door which communicated between Mabel's room and Parker's. "It is this," said Annie, "your Aunt Henrietta has been talking to me about the pearl necklace, and says she hopes you have it safe." "Well, yes," said Mabel, with a yawn, "it is quite absolutely safe, isn't it, Annie?" "Yes, but this is the crux. I thought she would have forgotten all about it, but she evidently hasn't, and she says she thinks a friend of hers, a Mrs. Ogilvy, is staying in the hotel, and if so, she would like to show it to her." "Oh, good gracious," said Mabel, springing to her feet, and knocking the brush out of Annie's hand in her excitement, "and if such a thing happens, and it is more than likely, what is to become of us?" "If such a thing happens," said Annie with extreme coolness, "there is only one thing to be done." "Oh Annie, what? We must pretend that we have lost it. So many people are robbed nowadays, we must be robbed also, that is all. Parker is supposed to have charge of it. You must confess that you never gave it to Parker, but put it into the lid of your trunk. You must lose 1 or 2 other things as well. You must have your story ready in case Mrs. Ogilvy is in the hotel." "Oh, I don't think I can stand any more of this," said poor Mabel. "You seem to lead me on, Annie, from one wickedness to another. I don't know where it is to end." "You must obey me in this," said Annie with great determination. "Oh, we are both lost. We are nearly out of the wood, we are not going to lose our courage at the supreme moment. Come now, Mabel, don't be absolutely silly, nothing may happen. But if anything happens, you must be prepared to do what I tell you." "You have an extraordinary power over me," said Mabel. "I often and often wish that I had not yielded to you at that time when Aunt Henrietta wrote me that letter and I was so cross and disappointed. I think now that if you had not been present I should be a happier girl on the whole. I should be going back to the horrid school, of course, and Prisky would have left, but still." Come, said Annie, sitting down determinedly on a low chair by her friend's side. "What is the matter with you? I really have to go over old ground until things are quite disagreeable. What have you not won through me? A whole year's emancipation, a jolly, delightful winter, a pleasant autumn at the Italian lakes and in Rome and Florence. I think, from what she tells me, Lady Lushington means to go to Cairo for the cold weather. Of course you will go with her. Think of the dresses unlimited, and the balls and the fun, and the expeditions up the Nile. Oh, you more than lucky Mabel. And then home again in the early spring, and preparations for your great debut taking place, your presentation dress being ordered, and all the rest. Imagine this state of things instead of pursuing the life which your poor faithful little Annie will lead at Mrs. Littleton's school. And yet you blame me because you have to pay a certain price for these enjoyments. I do blame you, Annie, I can't help it. I know it all sounds most fascinating, but if you are not happy deep down in your heart, where's the use?" When Mabel said this Annie looked really alarmed. "But you are quite happy," she said. "You are not going to follow that idiotic Prisky. You are not going to get a horrible, troublesome conscience to wake itself up and torment you over this most innocent little affair." "I will go through it, of course," said Mabel. It seemed very bad at the beginning, but the amount of badness it has risen to now shocks even me. Still, I will go through that, for I cannot go back. As to Prisky, I am convinced she would rather be apprenticed as a dressmaker than live as she is doing with that load on her conscience. Oh, bother Prisky, cried Annie. She is one of those intolerable, conscientious girls whom one cannot abide. All the same, she added a little bitterly, she took advantage of my talent as much as you did, Mabel. Mabel sighed, groaned, struggled, but eventually yielded absolutely to Annie's stronger will, and it was definitely arranged between the two girls that Mabel was to be fully prepared to declare the loss of her necklace if Mrs. Ogilvy was proved to be in the hotel. If she is not, it will be all right, said Annie, for I know your Aunt Henrietta pretty well by this time, and she will have other things to occupy her mind. We can soon find out if the good woman is there through Parker. I don't think I would consult Parker if I were you, said Mabel. She talks a great deal to Aunt Henrietta, and of late, somehow, I have rather imagined that she is a little suspicious. Annie soon afterwards retired to her own room, but not like Mabel and Lady Lushington, to rest. Those who follow crooked ways have seldom time for rest, and Annie Brooke was finding this out to her cost. She was really exceedingly tired, even her strength could scarcely stand the strain of the last few weeks. Priscilla's misery, Mabel's recklessness, Lady Lushington's anger with regard to Mrs. Priestley's bill, the terrible possibility of being found out, all these things visited the girl, making her not sorry for her sin, but afraid of the consequences. Then, too, in spite of herself, she was a little anxious with regard to Uncle Maurice. There was always a possibility, just a possibility, that Uncle Maurice might be as bad as that tiresome John Saxon had declared him to be. And if so, was she any kind about it all? A great many things had happened, and Annie had sinned very deeply. Oh, well, she was not going to get her conscience into speaking order, that mentor within must be kept silent at any cost. Still, she was too restless to lie down on her bed, which, indeed, was not specially inviting, for the room was a most minute one, and looked out on a wall of the hotel, which, as with most great foreign hotels, surrounded a court. Not a peep of any glorious view could be seen from Annie's window, and the hot western sun poured into the little room, making it stiflingly hot, and she could even smell the making of many dishes from the kitchens, which lay just beneath her windows. So she changed her dress, made herself look as neat and fresh as possible, and ran downstairs into the great, cool hall. It was delicious in the hall. The doors were wide open, the windows also stood apart, and in every direction were to be seen peaks of snow-clad mountains soaring up far into the clouds. Even Annie was touched for a minute by the glorious view. She went and stood in the cool doorway, and was glad of the refreshing breeze which fanned her hot cheeks. Business, however, must ever be foremost. She was pining for a cup of tea, but it was one of Lady Lushington's economies never to allow extra things to be ordered at the hotel. She had tea made for herself and her party in her room every day, and therefore kept strictly to the pension terms. Annie, however, suddenly remembered that she herself was the proud possessor of £80. Surely so wealthy a young lady need not suffer from thirst. She accordingly called a waiter and desired him to bring her the complet. This he proceeded to do, suggesting at the same time that the young lady should have her tea on the terrace. The broad terrace was covered by an enormous veranda, and Annie found it even more enjoyable outside than in. She liked the importance of taking her tea alone, and was particularly gratified when several nice-looking people turned to look at her. She was certainly an attractive girl, and when her cheeks became flushed she was almost pretty. The waiter came up and asked her for the number of her room. She gave it, and he immediately remarked, "I beg your pardon, madam, I did not remember that you belonged to Lady Lushington's party." "Yes, but I wish to pay for this tea myself," said Annie, and she produced, with considerable pride, a £5 note. The man withdrew at once to fetch the necessary change. As he did this, a party of travellers who had evidently only just arrived turned to look at Annie. There was nothing very special about her action, nevertheless the little incident remained fixed in their memories. They had heard the waiter say, "You belong to Lady Lushington's party." The note of wonder was struck in their minds that a girl of Annie's age and in the care of other people should pay for her own tea. Annie, however, collected her change with great care, counting it shrewdly over and putting it into her purse. She then re-entered the lounge. When she did so, the lady who was seated near her turned to her husband and said, "Is it possible that Lady Lushington is here?" "It seems so," said the gentleman, "but we can soon ascertain, my dear, by looking at the visitors' list." I shall be exceedingly pleased if she is, said Mrs. Ogilvy, for it was she. I have not seen Henrietta Lushington for 2 or 3 years. She used to be a great friend of mine. But what in the world is she doing with that girl? Why should not Henrietta Lushington have a girl belonging to her party? Was Mr. Ogilvy's response. There is nothing the matter with that fact, is there, Susan? Oh, nothing, and I know she has a niece, but somehow I never thought that the niece would look like that girl. Why, what in the world is the matter with her? I thought her quite pretty. Oh, my dear Henry. Pretty perhaps, but not classy, not for a moment the style of girl that Lady Lushington's niece would be expected to be. And then her paying for her own tea, it seemed to me slightly bad form. However, perhaps the girl does not belong to our Lady Lushington at all. Meanwhile Annie was doing a little business on her own account in the Great Hall. She had got possession of the visitors' book, and was scanning the names of the visitors with intense interest. Nowhere did she see the name Ogilvy, and in consequence a great load was lifted from her heart. She ran up in high spirits to Mabel's room. "No fear, May, no fear," she said, skipping about as she spoke. "Mrs. Ogilvy is not here at all, I have looked through the list." "Well, that's a comfort," said Mabel, who was lying on her bed half asleep before Annie came in. "But what a restless spirit you are, Annie. Can you ever keep still for a minute? I was certain you were asleep in your room." "You could not sleep much yourself in my room, darling. It is a little hot and a little dinnery. Not that I complain, but there is a magnificent hall downstairs, and such a terrace. And, do you know, I received a wee present of money a couple of mornings ago from darling Uncle Maurice, so I treated myself to some tea. I was thirsty. I had it all alone on a little table on the terrace. I can tell you I felt distinguished." "You poor dear," said Mabel. "Why, of course you ought to have had tea when we had it. I will say this for you, Annie, that you are the queerest mixture I ever came across. You have, oh, you know the side to which I allude, but then, on the other hand, you are the most absolutely unselfish creature that ever lived. Why, even Parker has been enjoying delicious tea, and we never thought of you at all." "Poor little me," said Annie. "Well, it doesn't matter, for, you see, I thought of myself. Now I will leave you. Be sure you make an effective toilet tonight. There are really some very nice-looking people downstairs. We shall have a jolly time at this hotel. What a good thing it is we got rid of Prisky. She made us look so odd and peculiar. I suppose the poor thing is bored to death at Hendon by this time," said Mabel. "Oh no, she is not quite there yet. She will have plenty of time to think of her conscience while she is at Hendon. And now you and I will forget her." Annie spent the next hour or two on the terrace, where she pretended to read, and looked at the different visitors as they came in and out of the hotel. She went up in good time to her bedroom, and Parker, who was always exceedingly particular with regard to the dress of both the young ladies, arrayed her on this occasion in a dress of the softest, palest, most becoming blue crepe de chine. This demi-toilette, with its elbow sleeves and lace falling away from the young, round throat, was absolutely the most becoming garment Annie could possibly wear. It seemed to add to the blue of her blue eyes and to bring out the golden shades of her lovely hair. She felt as she entered the great sala manger that she was looked at very nearly as much as Lady Lushington and Mabel. They had a pleasant little dinner in one of the great bay windows, which commanded a glorious view of the Alps, and during dinner Lady Lushington was her most charming self, and continued to be exceedingly friendly to Annie. It was not until the meal had nearly come to an end that a remark was made which caused both girls to feel slightly uncomfortable. Lady Lushington turned to Mabel. "My dear Mabel," she said, "I am really rather annoyed." "What about, Auntie?" "Oh, please don't be annoyed this glorious evening," interrupted Annie. "We are so happy and you are so sweet. I thought perhaps we might have coffee on the terrace. I know the very table where we can sit and we can watch the moon sailing up from behind that great mountain. I cannot possibly remember its name. I am not good at all at names." "We will have coffee on the terrace if I wish it, Annie Brooke. In the meantime I want to say what I have to say." No one knew better when she was snubbed than Annie. She immediately retired into her shell and looked very modest and pretty, something like a daisy when it droops its head. "I have been asking Parker about the jewels," continued Lady Lushington, turning to her niece, "and she assures me you did not give her the necklace to put away with the other things." Mabel colored. Annie said at once, "Mabel dear, did you not put it into the tray of your trunk? You know I asked you to be sure to give it to Parker." "I was in such a hurry at the last minute, I had not time, but it is quite safe in my trunk," said Mabel. Well, I hope it is, said Lady Lushington, but it is a foolish and dangerous thing to do, and, Annie, I thought you would see that Parker had the necklace. However, no matter now, you will give it, Mabel, to Parker tonight. It is not safe to have valuable jewels lying about in these hotels. You know that there is a notice in every room that the proprietors will not consider themselves liable if they are lost. No one can tamper with the jewel case, however, when it is under Parker's care. The girls murmured something, and the subject was dropped. They then all went out on the terrace. They had not been there more than a minute or two when a lady was seen to emerge from a shadowy corner and advance towards Lady Lushington. There was an affectionate interchange of greetings, and Annie whispered to Mabel to come away. How tiresome, said Mabel. When once Aunt Henrietta gets hold of an old friend she is good for nothing. Now she won't take us anywhere and we shall be as dull as ditch water. Oh, nonsense, Mabel. We will make friends on our own account. What a good thing the friend is not Mrs. Ogilvy. How can you tell that she isn't? Said Mabel. Why, of course she isn't. Mrs. Ogilvy's name is not on the visitors list. The girls paced up and down. I got a great fright at dinner, said Mabel after a pause, but you helped me out of it as usual. Yes, but it was an awkward moment, said Annie. I didn't for a moment suppose that your aunt would keep on thinking of that necklace. I hope she won't insist on seeing it. I am afraid, after all, even though Mrs. Ogilvy is not here, we must manage to lose it. Oh, I shall go wild if I have to go through that sort of thing, was Mabel's answer. Besides, continued Annie, the friend your aunt met may be another of those women who adore looking at bargains and old-fashioned gems. I am certain we shall have to lose it, there is no other possible way out. And I know I shall die in the process, said Mabel. I feel myself quite wasting away. You are too silly, said Annie. You look as bonny as ever you can look, and there isn't a scrap of any appearance of decline about you. It was at that moment that Lady Lushington's voice was heard calling in the darkness, Mabel, come here. Now what does she want? Said Mabel. Come with me, for goodness sake, Annie. I can't walk a single step of this tortuous way without your help. Really, Mabel, said Annie, you are using quite a poetic expression. Your character of a poetess will be established, my dear, if you continue to speak in that vein. Mabel, said her aunt. I will help you through your tortuous way, laughed Annie, and the girls advanced arm in arm. Mabel, said Lady Lushington, I have the pleasure of introducing you to my dear friend Mrs. Ogilvy. Poor Mabel gave a start, but for Annie's supporting arm, big as she was, she might have fallen. The terrace was lighted with Japanese lanterns, which swayed slightly in the faint breeze. These cast lights here and there, and immense shadows in other directions. Annie and Mabel had now got into the light. Lady Lushington moved a step or two, bringing Mrs. Ogilvy forward as she did so, and the four figures were all distinctly visible. Which of these girls is your niece, my dear Henrietta? Said Mrs. Ogilvy. This is my niece, Susan, was Lady Lushington's response, and Mabel felt her hand clasped by a kindly but firm palm. She looked into the eyes of a tall woman with a pleasant expression of face, who was becomingly dressed in black lace. This lady had hair turning grey, and a face which did not show the slightest trace of being made up. She might have been 50 years of age. I must also introduce you, said Lady Lushington, to our little friend Miss Brooke. Miss Brooke, Mrs. Ogilvy. Annie's hand was also held for a minute, and Annie instantly remembered that she had sat next this lady when she was enjoying her tea on the terrace, and that Mrs. Ogilvy had seen her pay for her own meal. But she could not allow this trifling circumstance to worry her on the present occasion, there were too many other rocks ahead. We will go into the hall in a minute or two, said Lady Lushington, and then, Mabel, you will go upstairs, please, and bring down the pearl necklace which I bought at Interlaken. Mrs. Ogilvy is so much interested in antique gems and old settings that I was telling her about it. You sometimes do pick up good things, said the lady, in out-of-the-way places. From what you tell me, Henrietta, you seem to have hit upon a bargain. I must be just, said Lady Lushington. I should never even have heard of the necklace but for this dear, clever little girl, Miss Brooke. It was she who discovered it. Mrs. Ogilvy glanced for a minute at Annie. Annie's eyes were raised and fixed on the good lady's face. How lovely it is here, said Mrs. Ogilvy after a pause. I think the peace of nature the most soothing thing in all the world. Don't you, Miss Brooke? Annie said, yes, uttering the word with a little gasp. She was wondering in her heart of hearts what to do next. Whatever happened, she must rush upstairs with Mabel. How could she have overlooked Mrs. Ogilvy's name in the visitors list? But Mrs. Ogilvy's next words explained the circumstance. "We too are fresh arrivals," she said. "We must have come by the very next train after you, Henrietta." "Oh dear," thought Annie. "If you only would have stayed away. How one does get pursued by all sorts of contrary influences when one is just hoping that one is out of the wood. The peace of nature indeed. Much peace it gives to me." "It is getting a little chilly here," said Lady Lushington. "I think, if you don't mind, Susan, we will go indoors. Girls, you can follow us in a few minutes." Annie gave a deep sigh of relief. Not a word about the necklace. Perhaps there might be a few hours' reprieve. Perhaps it would not be mentioned again until the morning. The two elderly ladies moved slowly together into the house, and the girls were left alone. "Didn't I tell you," said Mabel, "that she would be sure to be here? Isn't it just like our bad luck?" "We must go through with it," said Annie. "Perhaps it is best in the end. Of course there will be a commotion and a great fuss, but nothing ever can be discovered." "I know what they will do," said Mabel, in an agony of terror. "They will search all the jewelers' shops at Interlaken, and of course it will be found." "Oh Annie, I am fit to die." "You must compose yourself," said Annie. "Things are not quite as bad as that. We should indeed be in a desperate hole if I had sold the necklace to a jeweler at Interlaken, but I did nothing of the sort." "Then you didn't sell it at all. You have it all the time." "Now, Mabel, what nonsense you talk. Didn't I show you 3 10-pound notes, and didn't I send them to Mrs. Priestley?" "Oh, I am bewildered," said poor Mabel. "Why did I ever pose as a genius? I am sure I have no head at all for the complications of wickedness." "You are very complimentary to me, I must say," said Annie. "But listen, I will calm your poor, palpitating little heart. I did a splendid thing. I sold the necklace to Mr. Manchuri." "Who on earth is Mr. Manchuri?" said Mabel. "Mabel, you really are silly. He is the dear old Jewish gentleman who took Priscilla Weir home." "And why did you give it to him?" "Because, my dear, I invariably use my eyes and my ears and, if possible, my tongue, and I made a discovery with regard to Mr. Manchuri. He owns a big jeweler's shop in Bond Street, therefore why should not he have the necklace? So you see it is safe out of Switzerland by this time." "And," continued Mabel, "he gave £30 for it." "Oh, he didn't think much of it," said Annie. "Still, he gave me that, and I was glad to close with the offer." "Well," said Mabel, "it is a certain relief to know that it won't be found in any of the shops in Interlaken." "It is a very great relief," said Annie. "And now our object is, if possible, to make little of it to Lady Lushington. I think I can manage that, but come upstairs, won't you? I am certain your aunt won't say anything more about the stupid old thing this evening." "I hope not, I am sure," said Mabel. "But don't go in for a minute or two, Annie, for the omnibus has just arrived, and we may as well watch the fresh visitors." The girls came forward towards the deep porch. The large green and gold omnibus, with the words, Beau Séjour, painted conspicuously on its sides, drew up with a clatter and fuss in front of the hotel. Waiters and servants of different sorts darted out to assist the visitors to alight. The omnibus was nearly full, and there was a quantity of luggage on the roof. Ladders were put up to get it down. And the girls watched the proceedings with intense amusement, the pearl necklace forgotten, all cares for the moment laid aside. They made a pretty pair as they stood thus side by side. Annie, in her ethereal blue dress, might have been taken for that sweetest of all flowers, the blue forget-me-not. Mabel, in her purest white, for the stately lily. So thought for a brief instant a certain young man as he alighted from the omnibus, but the next moment his face changed. A hard expression came into his eyes. He came straight up to Annie Brooke. "I have come for you, Annie," he said. Chapter 23. A stern decision. In the briefest of all instants everything changed for Annie Brooke. The gay people, the gay hotel, the pleasant, easy living seemed to fade from her sight. She trembled all over. Mabel looked at her in astonishment. "Come indoors, I must speak to you. We must go away tonight if possible," said John Saxon. "May I introduce my friend Mabel Lushington?" said Annie, making a valiant effort to recover herself. Saxon bowed to Mabel as though he did not see her. Annie whispered to her friend. "He is my cousin. I am afraid, my dear, that Uncle Maurice is very ill. I will come to you in your room, Mabel, soon. Please don't say a word to Lady Lushington." Mabel nodded. There was an anxious note in Annie's voice which was unmistakable. Mabel was not specially sympathetic, and would never be so to one she knew as thoroughly as she did Annie. But even she recognized the reality of Annie's present trouble. What in the world am I to do without her? She thought as, refusing the lift, she went up the wide and spacious staircase, up and up to that fourth floor of the immense hotel where the Lushingtons' rooms were situated. Meanwhile Saxon drew Annie aside into a small room which led out of the great hall. "Why did not you come when I telegraphed? I sent you money for the purpose. You must come with me now, at once. A train leaves here for England at midnight. Will you go and pack your things? Take that off." He glanced at the pretty blue dress. "Get ready. Do you wish to see him alive?" "John, don't look at me like that. Where is the use? How could I tell that Uncle Maurice was so ill? I can't stand it, John, if you look at me like that. Although you are my cousin, John, you have no right to." "No right to," he said with scorn. "I know a woman when I see her, and a butterfly when I look at her. Do you think it was a pleasure to me to leave the dying old man, to run the risk of his dying in my absence, in order to bring you to him? But he shall have his last great wish gratified, and I believe God will spare him just that he may see you again. But I tell you what it is, Annie Brooke, if we return and find that Son has left the world before the one wish of his heart is gratified, I shall feel uncommonly like cursing you. Now you know what I think of you. Go upstairs at once and get ready, we leave here immediately." "Oh John," moaned poor Annie. But John Saxon was obdurate. One of the waiters came in and asked the gentleman if he wanted a room. John briefly explained his errand. He would have a meal of some sort, he said, and must leave by the midnight train. The young lady, Miss Brooke, his cousin, would accompany him. If Mabel scorned the lift in order to get to her room, Annie was glad to avail herself of it. She was glad to sink back into a corner of the spacious lift and close her eyes for a minute and try to recover her scattered thoughts. Was the whole world crumbling to pieces around her? Were all her schemes to come to naught? The necklace, would her dealings with Mr. Manchuri in the matter of the necklace ever be discovered? Would other matters in connection with that disgraceful affair come to light? Would Mabel, poor silly Mabel, left all alone with Lady Lushington and Mrs. Ogilvy, confess the truth? Annie was terrified that Mabel would do so. At this moment she dreaded Mabel even more than she had dreaded Priscilla, for Mabel was essentially weak, whereas Priscilla was essentially strong. If Priscilla thought it right to go through a certain course, she would go through it, come what might, but Mabel could be moved and turned and tossed about by any wind of chance. Mabel was certainly in a tight hole. To pursue a different metaphor, her little boat was out on a most stormy sea. With Annie as pilot it might get safely to shore, but without Annie it was sure to knock to pieces on the rocks of circumstance. Mabel would tell. What was Annie to do? Why had John Saxon come? How she hated, how she loathed her manly cousin at that moment. What a fool she had been to give him her address. She had done it in a moment of impulse, little guessing that he would act upon the information so quickly. He had come in person. She could not shuffle out of the strong grasp of that iron determination. She must leave all her fun just where she hoped it was really beginning. It was a pale and worn-out Annie who presently arrived in Mabel's room. Mabel was pacing up and down, her face quite chalky in color and her eyes wild with fright. "Well, now," she said the moment she saw her friend, "what is to be done?" "Oh, do think of someone besides yourself," said Annie. "Have you no pity for me, with my dear uncle so ill, dying?" "But you don't really care," said Mabel, looking full at Annie. Annie felt inclined to stamp her foot. "You little wretch," she said. "Do you suppose I have no heart?" "To be truthful with you, Annie," said Mabel, "I do not think you have much, but that's not the point. Are you really going with that dreadful young man?" "My cousin, Mr. Saxon. Yes, we leave here by the midnight train. I have about 2 hours longer to spend in the hotel. Then what am I to do?" said Mabel. Annie sat down determinedly. "Let me think," she said. She covered her face for a moment with her hand. Already she was beginning, after a fashion, to recover herself, to get back her aplomb, her great talent for double-dealing. "Let me think," she said again. "Well, don't be long," said Mabel, "for time passes." "Yes, but if you will be silent I will have thought out something after a minute or two." Just then Parker tapped at the door. "Shall I let her in?" whispered Mabel. In reply to this, Annie herself went to the door, unlocked it, and flung it wide open. "Come in, Parker, come in," she said. Why, what is the matter with you, Miss Brooke? Said that astute woman. A great deal, replied Annie. I have got to go home at once. My cousin, Mr. Saxon, has come to fetch me. My dear uncle is dying. He has been as a father to me. I must leave by the midnight train. So I heard downstairs, said Parker, putting on a certain sympathetic manner and trying to penetrate beneath Annie's apparent grief. I will pack your things for you, of course, Miss Brooke, you need have no trouble on that score. I came up here to offer my services. What dress will you wear traveling, miss? Oh, my dark blue serge will be best, but it doesn't matter, said Annie. I will put in some of the pretty things you wore while you were here, miss, said Parker. I know her ladyship would wish it. I don't suppose your trunks will quite hold them all, but I can get in a good many. Thank you, Parker, I don't care about 'em now. I am in dreadful trouble about dear uncle. Of course you must be, miss, but I am sure we are all sorry to lose you, for you do manage her ladyship in the most wonderful way, and I will say that you are as unselfish and pleasant-spoken a young lady as ever I came across. You will find the dresses and other things useful some time, miss, so I will get as many as ever I can into your trunks. Annie murmured something. She would love to keep her pretty dresses, they would be effective at school. She could think of school and her appearance there, and the looks of envy of her companions even at this supreme moment. Then I will go and pack at once, said Parker, preparing to leave the room. She had nearly got as far as the door when she turned. By the way, miss, she said, looking at Mabel, my mistress is quite annoyed about a necklace she bought for you at Interlaken yesterday. She said that it was valuable, although old-fashioned, a pearl necklace set in silver. She thought I had it with the rest of the jewels, but you never gave it to me, Miss Lushington. My mistress said that I was to see it safely in the jewel case before I went to bed tonight. Where did you put it? Can I get it now, miss? Mabel was silent, her voice quite choked with the agony of the moment. Annie, however, took the initiative. Of course you can, Parker, she said. It was awfully silly of Mabel not to give you the box that contained the necklace. It was the most idiotic thing I ever heard of. I am sure, darling, I urged you to do so. But there, no doubt it is safe. You put it into the lid of your big trunk. Mabel nodded. She could not bring herself to speak. Then we will find it immediately, said Annie. Notwithstanding my own great sorrow, it will be a comfort to me to know that the necklace is safe under Parker's care before I leave, for the fact is, Parker, it was I who discovered it. I thought it was quite a valuable thing, but I am rather afraid now that Lady Lushington paid too much for it. However, that is neither here nor there, we have got to find it. Here are the keys of Miss Lushington's trunks, said Parker. She proceeded as she spoke to unlock the largest of the trunks, which happened to be a canvas one, and slightly the worse for travel. I am very sorry indeed, miss, you put it in here, said Parker. Why, see how loose the cover is. A person could almost put his hand in between the cover and the inside of the trunk. Well, where did you put it, miss? I will find it, said Annie. She stooped as she spoke and began that examination which she knew beforehand must be fruitless. Mabel stood with her back to the two, looking out of the window. Annie longed to shake her. Was not her very attitude giving the whole thing away? I really can't find it, said Annie after a moment's pause. Do come and look yourself, May. Are you dazed? Have you lost your senses? Oh, I know, poor darling May. It is sorrow at parting with poor little me. Parker, Miss Mabel just adores me, don't you, precious one? Well, Parker will do all she can for you when I am gone. I can't take your place, Miss Brooke. I am really sorry you have to go, but now, Miss Mabel, the best thing to do is just to empty the lid of the trunk. We'll get to the box that way without disarranging all your pretty things. The lid of the trunk was speedily emptied, and of course no necklace was found. There, said Annie. Her heart was beating so fast that the pallor of her face was far from assumed. The fear in her eyes, too, seemed only too natural. Someone has stolen it, she said to Parker. She clasped the woman's arm. What are we to do? Parker looked distinctly annoyed. Mabel stood stonily silent, apparently almost indifferent. Miss Lushington, said the woman, do wake up and consider, miss. Perhaps you didn't put it into the lid of the trunk, perhaps you put the box that held the necklace somewhere else. No, I didn't, I put it into the lid, said Mabel. I won't say I put it anywhere else, the lid will do, I put it there. I won't be bothered about it. She marched out of the room, got as far as the wide landing, and burst out crying. Her queer conduct and queer words terrified Annie and amazed Parker. "What is the matter with Miss Mabel, miss?" said the maid, turning to the girl. Annie put her pretty, white hand on Parker's arm. "Leave her alone with me for a little, please, Parker. Just go off and pack my things, like the jewel you are. She is awfully upset at my going, and you know I must, on account of my dear uncle." Annie's voice quavered. Indeed, she herself was very nearly breaking down. "I must go, you know, Parker," she said, her pretty eyes filling with tears which only added to their beauty. "But I'll manage, Mabel. It is dreadful about the necklace, but perhaps you will recover it." "We never will," said Parker. "It's a dreadful bit of business. Her ladyship will be wild. She does so hate it when anything is stolen. But there are lots of robberies taking place on the railways of late. It is a perfect disgrace. Even the registering of your goods seems not to secure things. Of course I always carry the jewels in my own hand, it's the only safe way. Miss Mabel must have been mad to put a valuable necklace such as her ladyship described into that old trunk. It wasn't nearly so valuable as Lady Lushington supposed, that is the only comfort," said Annie. "But, miss, I don't understand. I thought it was you who urged her ladyship to get it, and that you had quite a knowledge of gems." "I found out afterwards. I will tell you the secret, Parker, and you can break it to her ladyship when I am gone. I found out afterwards that I had made a slight mistake. The necklace was worth, say, about £20, but no more, for some of the pearls were quite worthless. I happened to show it to a gentleman I knew very slightly at the Bellevue Hotel, and he deals in that sort of thing. He disappointed me in his estimate of the necklace, but that doesn't matter. It is terrible that it should be lost. Still, you might tell Lady Lushington what he said. There is no use in telling Mabel. She doesn't care tuppence about it, poor child, at the present moment, she is so broken down at my leaving. Well, miss, I must be off to do the packing. I will make the best of things and never forget how pleasant you have been during your visit, miss. I will see, too, that you have a basket of sandwiches and some wine packed for your journey." Parker went off. The moment she did so, Annie went into the corridor and fetched Mabel in. "Oh, you goose of all geese," she said. "Now the worst is over, I tell you the worst is over. You don't suppose for a single moment your aunt, Lady Lushington, will think that you stole the necklace or that I stole it. She will suppose, most assuredly, that it was stolen on the journey between Interlaken and Zermatt. Parker is convinced on the subject, and I have let Parker understand that it was not nearly as valuable as I supposed. Lady Lushington won't trust me to manage a bargain for her again, that is the worst that can happen. Now, May, do cheer up. You are all right. I will manage things for you when Priscilla's Christmas bill comes round. You will see plenty of me, I fancy, between now and then. Dry your eyes, darling. I know you are sorry to part from me. I can't go on being wicked without you, that's the principal thing," said Mabel. "I know I'll give in. Think what injury you'll do me, and do you really want to go back to that horrid school?" "I don't think I'd mind so very much, it was peaceful, at least at school. You would soon be sick of that sort of peace." "I suppose I should," said Mabel. She had already wiped her eyes, and she began slightly to cheer up. "Annie," she said eagerly, "is your uncle really dying?" "John Saxon says so, otherwise, of course, he would not have come," said Annie. "If," said Mabel, trembling a good deal, "if afterwards you could come back." Annie's heart bounded. "I can't talk of it," she said, "don't speak of it now. When the time comes, if you were to write, I will write to you, that is, if I have strength to write to anyone. You have my address. You know how deeply I shall always love you. You know there is no good turn I would not do for you. I want you to help me until Priscilla's year at school is out," was Mabel's matter-of-fact retort. "Of course, dear, of course, and I will. Your Annie will never forsake you. But now perhaps we had better go downstairs." The girls made a quite picturesque appearance as they went slowly down the broad staircase. Mabel had not cried enough to look ugly, and Annie's few tears and pallor and evident distress gave to her face the depth of expression which in her lighter moments it had lacked. John Saxon was seated close to Lady Lushington. Lady Lushington had recognized him as a friend and a favorite. He rose when the girls appeared, and Lady Lushington went at once up to Annie. Her manner was very cold and distant. "You did not give me the slightest idea, Miss Brooke, how ill your uncle was when you received your cousin's letter." "I didn't know that he was especially ill," said Annie. Lady Lushington looked full at her. It seemed at that moment that a veil had fallen away from Annie's face, and that the gay, proud, and selfish woman of the world saw the girl for the first time as she was. Lady Lushington, with all her faults, the faults of her class and her manner of life, was exceedingly good-natured, and could be remarkably kind. She was thoroughly angry with Annie for concealing the truth with regard to John Saxon's letter. She could, and would, forgive much to any young girl who was enjoying herself and who wanted to continue the good time which had fallen to her lot. But to forget one who stood in the place of a father, to let him long for her in vain, was more than Lady Lushington could stand. "I don't appreciate that sort of thing," she said to herself. "It is, somehow, beneath me. I don't understand it." She made up her mind on the spot, that, as far as Mabel was concerned, the friendship between the two girls was to terminate there and then. Never would she have anything farther to do with Annie Brooke. As that was the case, she did not consider it necessary to correct her. "I am sorry," she said briefly, "that you did not interpret very plain English in the manner in which it was intended. I don't think for a single moment that your cousin meant to complain of you to me, but he simply quoted some words of his letter, and seemed altogether astonished that you did not start for England the day before yesterday. However, I trust you will find your dear uncle alive when you get home. I have desired Parker to pack your things, and now you would doubtless like to go up and change your dress." "Thank you," said Annie very meekly. She glanced in Mrs. Ogilvy's direction, but Mrs. Ogilvy took no notice of her. "Mabel, come and sit here near Mrs. Ogilvy," said Lady Lushington as Annie once again disappeared. "You can say goodbye to your friend presently. There is no necessity for you to spend the whole evening upstairs." Chapter 24. Home no more. It was all over, the fun, the gaiety, the good things of life, the delights of fine living, the charm of being with rich friends. It is true that Annie Brooke returned to England with a little private fund of her own in her pocket, but John Saxon insisted on her returning him the 2 £5 notes he had enclosed to her. Out of these he paid for her ticket back to England. John Saxon was a very cold, silent, and unsympathetic fellow traveller. He sat moodily in a corner, wrapped in his greatcoat, the collar of which he turned up. A travelling cap came well down over his head, so that Annie could see little or nothing of his face. He had done what he could to make her comfortable, and had wrapped her round with warm things. Then he had taken no further notice of her. On the whole, Priscilla Weir had a far more interesting journey to England than had that spoiled child of fortune Annie Brooke. Annie, however, was glad to be left alone. She did not want to talk to that odious man, cousin John Saxon. But for him, life would not have been suddenly spoiled for her. She would not have been found out. She was far too clever not to be sure that Lady Lushington had found her out. Not that Lady Lushington had discovered any serious crimes to lay at her door, but then she had read her character aright, and that character was of the sort which the great lady could not tolerate. Therefore Annie was, and she knew it well, shut away from any further dealings with Mabel Lushington. Poor Mabel! How would she provide the money for Priscilla's 2 remaining terms at school? How would she go through a stern catechism with regard to the necklace when Annie was no longer by her side? "Everything will be discovered," thought Annie Brooke. "There is no help for it. What shall I do? And I'd managed so well and so cleverly. There isn't a bit of good in being clever in this world. It seems to me it's the stupid people that have the best times. Of course that idiotic old Mabel will let out the whole story before many hours are over. And then there'll be a frightful to-do, and perhaps Mabel will be sent back to Mrs. Littleton's school, that is, if Mrs. Littleton will receive her, which fact I very much doubt. As to me, oh, well, I'll have to hide somewhere. I hope to goodness Mr. Manchuri will never tell anybody about the necklace. He faithfully promised he wouldn't, and he seemed an honorable sort of man. But then, ought I to expect anyone to be honorable in his dealings with me? I don't know, the world seems coming to pieces. Horrid John Saxon. How I detest him. Oh, I feel as though I could go mad." Annie started up impatiently. She went across the carriage and opened one of the windows, putting her head out at the same time. She hoped Saxon would take some notice. She wanted him to speak to her. His silence, his apparent indifference to her, were just the sort of thing to madden the girl in her present mood. Saxon was seated facing the engine, and, in consequence, when Annie opened the window wide he was exposed to a tremendous draught. He bore it for a minute or two, then, rising, he said very quietly, "Will you excuse me? I don't think the night air is good for you, and it is certainly bad for me. I will, therefore, with your permission, shut the window, it is cold." I am suffocating, said Annie. I will open it again in a few minutes so that you can have fresh air from time to time. Oh, said Annie, with a sudden burst of passion, beating one small hand over the other, why have you been so cruel to me? Saxon glanced at her. There was only one other occupant of the carriage, an old gentleman, who was sound asleep and snoring loudly. Won't you speak? Said Annie. Why do you sit so silent, so indifferent, when you have spoiled my life? We have different ideas on that point, he said. You can do exactly as you please with your life, as far as I am concerned, by and by. At present you are under the care of your uncle, the Reverend Maurice Brooke. While he lives you have to do his wishes, to carry them out according to his views. I am helping him in this matter, not you. Afterwards, we will discover by your uncle's will what he wishes to have done with you. You are only 17, you must yield to the directions and the will of those who are older than yourself and who are placed by God in authority over you. Oh, how I hate you when you preach. Then perhaps you will not speak to me. I am exceedingly tired. A journey to Zermatt and back again without any rest makes a man inclined for slumber. I will sleep, if you have no objection. In the morning perhaps we shall both be in a better temper than we are at present. I wish, said Annie, speaking in sudden passion, that I could fling myself out of that window. You have destroyed every prospect I ever had in life. You talk in an exceedingly silly way, said Saxon. Now do try and be quiet, if you please. His absolute disregard of her threat to end her own miserable life made Annie at once furious and also strangely subdued. She sat back in her corner like a little wild creature caught in a trap. There was nothing whatever to be done but to submit. To submit as she was now doing was indeed new to Annie Brooke. Her head was in a whirl, but by and by, to her own relief, she also slept, and so part of the miserable journey was got through. It was late on the following afternoon when Annie and John Saxon found themselves driving in the gig to Rashley Rectory. They had to pass through the little village, and Annie looked with a sort of terror at Dawson's shop. She wondered if the matter of the cheque would ever be brought up against her. So occupied was she with herself and with all the dreadful things she had done that she could scarcely think of her dying old uncle at all. The memory of a text, too, which she had learned as a child began to be present with her. Her head was aching, and the text, with its well-known words, tormented her. Be sure your sin will find you out. Be sure, your sin, will find you out, murmured Annie in too low a tone for Saxon to hear. They had been met at the railway station with the information that Mr. Brooke was still alive, and Saxon uttered a sigh of relief. Then his journey had not been in vain. Then the old man would be gratified. The greatest longing and wish of his life would be fulfilled. The darling of his heart would be with him at the end. John Saxon turned and looked at the girl. She was crouching up in the gig. She felt cold, for the evenings were turning a little chill. She had wrapped an old cloak, which Mrs. Shelf had sent, around her slim figure. Her small, fair face peeped out from beneath the shelter of the cloak. Her eyes had a terrified light in them. Saxon felt that, for Mr. Brooke's sake, Annie must not enter the rectory in her present state of wild revolt and rebellion. He suddenly turned down a shady lane which did not lead direct to the rectory. His action awoke no sort of notice in Annie's mind. Her uncle was alive, he probably was not so very bad after all. This was a plot of John Saxon's, a plot to destroy her happiness. But for John, how different would be her life now. They drove down about 100 yards of the lane, and then the young man pulled the horse up and drew the gig towards the side of the road. This fact woke Annie from the sort of trance into which she had sunk, and she turned and looked at him. "Why are you stopping?" she asked. "Because I must speak to you, Annie," was her cousin's response. "Have you anything fresh to say? Is there anything fresh to say?" "There is something that must be said," replied John Saxon. "You cannot, Annie, enter the rectory and meet Mrs. Shelf, and, above all things, go into that chamber where your dear uncle is waiting for the angel of death to fetch him away to God, looking as you are doing now. You are, I well know, in a state of great mental misery. You have done wrong, how wrong, it is not for me to decide. I know of some of your shortcomings, but this is no hour for me to speak of them. All I can say at the present moment is this, that you are very young, and you are motherless, and, you are about, little Annie, to be fatherless. You are on the very eve of losing the noblest and best father that girl ever possessed. Your uncle has stood in the place of a father to you. You never appreciated him, you never understood him. He was so high above you that you could never even catch a glimpse of the goodness of his soul. But I cannot believe in the possibility of anyone being quiet without heart or quiet without some sense of honor, and I should be slow, very slow, to believe it of you. Now, there is one last thing which you have got to do for your Uncle Maurice, and I have brought you down here to tell you what that last thing is." Annie was silent. She shrank a little more into the shelter of the rough old cloak, and moved farther from her cousin. "You must do it, Annie," he said, speaking in a decided voice. "You must on no account whatever fail at this supreme juncture." "Well," said Annie when he paused. "Your uncle is expecting you. God has kept him alive in order that he may see your face again. To him your face is as that of an angel. To him those blue eyes of yours are as innocent as those of a little child. To him you are the spotless darling, undefiled, uninjured by the world, whom he has nurtured and loved for your father's sake and for your own. You must on no account, Annie, open his eyes to the truth with regard to you now. It is your duty to keep up the illusion as far as he is concerned. I have taken all this trouble to bring you to his bedside in order that he may have his last wish gratified, and you must not fail me. Perhaps your uncle's prayers may be answered, and God, who can do all things, will change your heart. Now, remember, Annie, you have to forget yourself tonight and to think only of the dying old man. Promise me that you will do so." "You have spoken very strangely, Cousin John," said Annie after a very long pause. I will do my best. I am very bad, but I will do my best." The next instant Annie's icy cold little hand was clasped in that of John Saxon. "You have to believe two things," he said. "A great man who was as your father, whom God is taking to himself. That man loves you with all his heart and soul and strength. When he dies, there is another man, unworthy, unfit truly, to stand in his shoes, but nevertheless who will not forsake you. Now let us get back to the rectory." There was a feeling of peace in the old house, a wonderful calm, a strange sense of aloofness as though the ordinary things of life had been put away and everyday matters were of no account. The fact was this, that for several days now, for long days and long nights, the beautiful angel of death had been brooding over the place, and the people who lived in the old rectory had recognized the fact and had arranged their own lives accordingly. Money did not matter at all in the shadow of that presence, nor did greatness, worldly greatness, that is, nor ambition, nor mere pleasure, and, above all things, self-love was abhorrent in that little home of peace, for the angel of death brooding there brought with him the very essence of peace. It was a curious fact that Annie Brooke, when she passed under the threshold and entered on what she expected to be the most awful time of her whole life, found that same peace immediately descend upon her. She lost all sense of fear, and every scrap of regret at having left the good and gay things of life at Zermatt. She had not been 5 minutes in the house before she forgot Zermatt, and Mabel, and Lady Lushington. It is true, she thought of Priscilla, and Priscilla's eyes seemed to haunt her. But even they, with their look of reproach, could not affect the queer peace that had fallen upon her. Mrs. Shelf kissed her warmly, not uttering a word of reproach, and Annie stepped with a light and fairy step, and crept to her own room and put on one of her little home dresses, a blue gingham which she often wore and which her uncle loved. She tripped downstairs again in a few minutes, and entered the kitchen and said to Mrs. Shelf, "Now I am ready." "Go in by yourself, darling," said Mrs. Shelf. "I won't take you. He is in the old room, there is no one with him. He knows you are here, he knew it the minute you stepped across the threshold. You couldn't deceive him, bless you. Go to him all alone, dearie, and at once." So Annie went. A minute later she was seated by the old man's bedside, and silently her little hand was laid on his. He just turned his head very slowly to look at her. They both felt themselves to be quite alone together except for the presence of the angel of death, who, brooding over the house, brooded more deeply over this sacred chamber, with wings held open, ready to spread themselves at any instant, and arms half extended to carry that saint of God to his home in the skies. Mr. Brooke had longed for Annie, had imagined her to be by his side in hours of delirium, had awakened to his usual senses a day or two before the end and had discovered her absence, had said no word of reproach with regard to his little Annie, but had missed her with a great heart hunger. Now she was here. She was his own dear child. To the rest of the world Annie was at that moment a wicked, designing, double-faced, double-natured creature, but to Mr. Brooke she was just his wee pet lamb, his darling, the treasure whom God had given him. "You are back, my love," he said when his very feeble voice could speak. "I missed you, my little one." "Yes, I am back," said Annie, and she did that which comforted him most. she laid her head on the pillow beside him, and kissed his cheek, already cold with the dews which precede the moment when the great angel of death carries the soul he has released from its prison away. "I am going to God," said Mr. Brooke. "It is a wonderful happiness that I am soon to be admitted into the presence of the King of Kings. There is no saying, Annie, what marvels will be revealed to me and what glories mine eyes shall look upon. I shall see in his good time the Savior of the world. When I am ready for that sight of all sights, it will be given to me. But, my own little Annie, even in that moment of satisfaction, when I wake up after his likeness, I shall carry you, my child, in my heart of hearts. I shall look for you, my little one. You will come to me, not yet, my darling, for you are very young, but some day. Promise me, my dearest dear." Annie's choked voice sounded low and faint. "I cannot hear you, my sweetest. Say the word I want, say the word I want to take away with me." "What shall I say, Uncle Maurice?" "Say, yes, one word, my darling, that I may carry it with me into the great eternity of God." "Yes, oh, yes," said Annie. "Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace," said the old man. Then the angel of death did open wide his glorious wings, and two bright spirits passed out of that room where one had come in. Chapter 25. Very dark days. Mr. Brooke's death was followed by total collapse on Annie's part. The time between the death and the funeral was passed by the girl in a sort of delirium, in which she was too restless to stay in bed, but too feverish to go out. On the day of the funeral itself, however, she did manage to follow her uncle to his last resting place. A pathetic little figure she looked in her deep mourning, with her pretty face very pale and her golden hair showing in strong relief against the sombre hue of her black dress. Saxon and Annie were the only relations who followed the Reverend Maurice Brooke to the grave. Nevertheless, the funeral was a large one, for the dead man had during a long lifetime made friends and not one single enemy. There was not a soul for miles round who did not know and love and mourn for the Reverend Maurice Brooke. All these friends, therefore, young and old, made a point of attending his funeral, and he himself might well have been there in spirit, so near did his presence seem to lonely Annie as she stood close to the graveside and saw the coffin lowered to its last resting place. She and John Saxon then returned to the rectory. Annie was better in health now, but very restless and miserable in spirit. Saxon was consistently kind to her. Her uncle's will was read, which left her all that he possessed, but that all was exceedingly little, not even amounting to sufficient to pay for Annie's school expenses at Mrs. Littleton's. Saxon asked her what she would like to do with her future. Her reply was almost inaudible, that she had no future, and did not care what became of her. Saxon was too deeply sorry for her to say any harsh words just then. Indeed, her grief touched him unspeakably, and he almost reproached himself for blaming her so severely for not attending to his first letter. It was 2 or 3 days after the funeral, and Saxon was making preparations to leave the old rectory, where Annie herself could remain for a few weeks longer under the care of Mrs. Shelf, when one morning he got a letter which startled him a good deal. Color rose to his cheeks, and he looked across at Annie, who was pouring out tea. "Do you know from whom I have just heard?" he said. "No," said Annie in a listless tone. She did not much care whom her cousin heard from, as she said over and over to herself, nothing ever need matter to her any more. But his next words startled her, and she found that she had a heart and susceptibilities, and that once again cruel, terrible fear could visit her. "This letter is from a man whom I happen to know exceedingly well. I have met him several times in Australia. He is a certain Mr. Manchuri." "Yes," said Annie, her lips parted and the color rushing into her cheeks. "He says he knows you, he met you at the Hotel Bellevue at Interlaken, and that, seeing your uncle's death in the paper, he has written for a double purpose, to convey his condolences to all those who loved your dear uncle, and to request me to meet him in town on important business in connection with you." "Oh," said Annie. She had been standing, she almost fell into her seat. "He says further," pursued Saxon, "that a great friend of yours, a Miss Priscilla Weir, is staying with him." "She told him, of course," said Annie. "What did you say, Annie?" John Saxon looked at her, a puzzled expression between his brows. Then he started to his feet. "I shall run up to town," he said. "I will go today and see what this means. It was through Miss Weir he learned that I was staying here. But for that he says that he would have come himself to have an interview with you. As it is, he thinks I can manage matters best." "Don't go," said Annie in a choked voice. "Don't do what, my dear Annie?" "Don't go, don't mind him. He means mischief." I don't want to be cross to you, dear Annie, but really this is silly. Mr. Manchuri is a most excellent man. I and my father before me have both known him. My father has transacted some business with him from time to time. He is a first-rate man of business, and straight, in every sense of the word. Of course I shall go. I cannot possibly neglect your affairs. Why, what is it, my dear? You can go if you like, said Annie. I don't feel well, that is all. She crept out of the room, tottering as she did so, and supporting herself by catching hold of various articles of furniture. When she disappeared, John thought for a minute. Then he went into the kitchen, where Mrs. Shelf was busy. Mrs. Shelf, he said, I have just had a letter which obliges me to go to London at once. I shall catch the next train. It is scarcely possible for me to be back tonight, but I shall certainly come early tomorrow. In the meantime you will look after Annie. You needn't doubt it, Mr. John, said Mrs. Shelf. Saxon lowered his voice. I don't quite like her appearance, he said. She is suffering a good deal. I think you ought to watch her. Don't let her out of your sight. Oh, I will see to her, Mr. John. The poor child is fretting. She has found her true heart at long last. The death of my beloved master has revealed many things to our Annie. Well, be careful of her, said the young man. I will be back as soon as I can. Shortly afterwards he started for town. As soon as ever the sound of the horse's hoofs which was conveying John Saxon to the railway station died away on the road, Annie, who had been crouching rather than lying down in her room, ran to the window and looked out. The semi-peaceful, semi-stunned expression on her face had given way now to the old watchful, almost crafty look which used to characterize it. She was quickly making up her mind. Mr. Manchuri could only want to see John Saxon on one subject, the necklace. Priscilla, horrid Priscilla, had told him everything. He had given Annie £100 for the necklace, 70 of which she had kept for herself. In all probability, if Mr. Manchuri carried things out to the bitter end, she could be locked up for theft. She might even see the inside of a prison. The terrified girl felt nearly mad. She paced up and down her little chamber, fearing, she knew not what. She would have prayed, but she did not dare. She would have cried to God, but as she knew nothing would induce her to be good and to confess her sin, she was equally certain that God would not listen to her. She remembered her promise to her uncle that she would meet him. Of course she never would. They were parted forever and ever. But she must not think of that now. She must think of the present, and there was not a single minute to lose. There was only one thing for Annie to do. She must go away. She had in her possession at that moment £70. With £70 she could go a good way. She could leave England, there was nothing else for it. She must be well out of the country before John Saxon returned from London. He would probably come to Rashley Rectory accompanied by Mr. Manchuri and that horrible Priscilla, and then the whole story would get out, the whole awful story, Annie's conduct with regard to the prize, Annie's conduct with regard to Susan Martin's poems, Annie's dreadful conduct with regard to Dawson and her uncle's cheque which she had kept for herself. John Saxon would remember how she had borrowed £20 from him, and that too would be told against her. But her last and very greatest crime seemed to be in connection with the pearl and silver necklace. Her theft was biggest here, her craftiness greater, her double-dealing more marked. Oh yes, such a character ought only to be put in prison. But she would not live in prison, she, the gay, the clever, the free, the bold. She would not lose her liberty, it was worth a struggle to keep it. And she had her stolen money, it should do something for her, it should help her to keep the only thing left, the power to go where she pleased, to do what she liked. Annie, my darling, called Mrs. Shelf's voice at the outside of the locked door. Coming in a minute, Mrs. Shelf, said Annie, making an effort to speak cheerfully. She knew well that if she was to carry out her project she must be very wary, she must make her plans. Fortunately for herself, she now believed that she was an experienced traveler, and that, once on the continent, she could easily baffle all attempts at discovering her. She went to a glass and surveyed her little face. It had more color than it had the day before, for excitement and the imminence of her peril brought back some of her old vivacity. After a minute's pause she opened the door and ran downstairs. Mrs. Shelf was in the kitchen. She was engaged mournfully and with considerable pain searching through cupboards and counting out all the possessions of the late Reverend Maurice Brooke which would now belong to Annie. The poor housekeeper was sighing bitterly over her famous stores of jam, over her incomparable jellies, over her pickles, her liqueurs, her bottles of homemade wine. Not for her again would the trees in the garden blossom and bear fruit, not for her would the strawberries redden or the raspberry canes yield of their abundance. Other people who could not possibly understand the value of the dear old garden would possess it, it would pass into the hands of strangers, and poor Mrs. Shelf felt perhaps as acutely as Annie herself that her life was over. Far more than Annie, too, did this worthy soul love the good old man who had passed away. It was a tearful face, therefore, she turned upon the girl. "Ah, my dearie," she said, "the days are turning a bit nippy for the time of year, and I thought you would be lonesome all by yourself in your bedroom. Come along and sit by the fire for a bit, won't you, lovey? And I'll warm you up a cup of good broth. I have some lovely and tasty in the pantry. Then maybe you'd help me to make a list of the glass and china and the old silver. There's a quantity of old silver, and most beautiful it is, and it's all yours, dear. Whenever you start a house of your own, you won't have to go far to seek for means of making it pretty. There'll be the silver and the china, and that magnificent Crown Derby dinner set that your precious uncle took such pride in, and there'll be the great branch candlesticks, old Sheffield they are, and very valuable, and there'll be the beautiful house linen, such linen as is not to be found anywhere else in the countryside. You won't be so bad off when you settle down with your good man, Miss Annie." "I'll never have a good man," said Annie in a petulant tone. "Nothing would induce me to marry. I hate the thought of it." "Poor lamb," said Mrs. Shelf, "you are but a baby yet, but the time will come, you mark my words." Annie made no reply. She gazed drearily into the fire. She was wondering how she could circumvent old Shelfie, who might, if she chose, prove a sad hindrance to her getting away before Saxon's return. "Shelfie," she said, "don't let's bother about the old things now. I tell you what, I'll go into the dining room and write some letters." "Oh no. I couldn't go near his study. I'll just go into the dining room and stay there for an hour or two, and then, if you will give me some lunch early, I will come and help you in the kitchen soon after that, but I don't feel up to it this morning." "When did John Saxon say he would be back, Shelfie?" "Not tonight, darling, but sometime tomorrow for sure. He's a very good young man, is Mr. John." "Well, Shelfie, you know I hate good young men," said Annie. Instead of reproving her, Mrs. Shelf laughed. "I declare, now," she said, "that speech of yours, naughty as it is more like your old self than anything I have heard you utter since you came back. But you mustn't turn against Mr. Saxon, lovey, for he is just the best of the best, and sets store by you, anyone can see that." "Well, I will go into the dining room now," said Annie, and she went out of the kitchen. Mrs. Shelf, quite cheered and reassured about her, went busily on with her duties, and Annie was presently able to go softly to her own bedroom, where she made preparations. She fastened her precious notes into her little pocket, which they placed in an inner petticoat, keeping out enough small change for her immediate necessities. She then carefully chose from her wardrobe some of the least smart dresses she had worn when at Interlaken. She must not wear her black, that would cause her to be discovered immediately. But the pretty print and cambric frocks which she had looked so charming in while away from home would not be recognized by any of those who might possibly think it worthwhile to follow on her track. A dark blue dress which she used to wear when traveling with Lady Lushington would also come in handy. In short, her very modest little wardrobe was quickly selected and put into a small traveling bag which they could carry herself in one hand. She could take this as far as the railway station, but that railway station was not to be the one just outside Rashley village, but another called Norton Paget, which was situated 3 miles farther down the line. Not a soul would recognize Annie at Norton Paget in the clothes Lady Lushington had given her. It would be easy to go from Norton Paget to London by the night express, and once in London, she would take an opportunity of getting as far away from England as her means would permit. Annie from time to time had been fond of reading detective stories, and in these she had learned that there was no place so splendid for hiding in as London itself. She did not know London very well, however, and felt that she would be safest farther afield. Having carefully packed her little bag, she hid it in a deep cupboard in her room, locked the cupboard, and put the key in her pocket. She then went downstairs. Mrs. Shelf coaxed her to come into the kitchen and share her dinner there. The dinner was very good and nourishing and comforting, and Annie ate quite heartily. She knew well that it was necessary to husband her strength. How to get Mrs. Shelf, however, away from the rectory for 2 or 3 hours towards nightfall was the problem which exercised Annie's brain. Think and think as she would, she was puzzled how to manage this. For if Mrs. Shelf was in the house, Annie knew well that she could not possibly leave it without being heard. If Mrs. Shelf missed her at once, the hue and cry would be raised, and she could not possibly walk to Norton Paget with her somewhat heavy bag before being discovered. It was, therefore, necessary to get both Mrs. Shelf and Dan, their one outside factotum, off the premises. Almost immediately after lunch, the morning, which had been a bright and sunny one, clouded over and the day became threatening. A few drops of rain, too, fell at intervals, and there was a slight autumnal sound in the wind. Annie started up from her meal apparently quite excited and anxious to begin those lists in which Mrs. Shelf took so deep an interest. The woman and the girl, therefore, began systematically to count over piles of linen, stacks of china, quantities of glass, and then, when these were done and they were both somewhat tired, to plunge into the mysteries of the famous store cupboard. Annie jotted down items on little scraps of paper. All of a sudden, as the dusk was beginning to fall, she turned to her companion. "Now I tell you what it is, Mrs. Shelf. We will make a clear list of all these things before I go to bed tonight." "Oh, nonsense, my dearie," said Mrs. Shelf. "You will be killed over it." "No, I won't. I should like to do it. I sleep very badly, and should enjoy the work. Please take me when I am in the humor, Shelfie. You know I am hard to control when I turn contrary." "That you are, my love, but you have been very sweet since you returned from Switzerland." "Well, if you want me to go on being sweet you must do what I want." "And what is that, dear?" "You must just put the horse to the gig and get Dan to drive you into Rashleigh in order to buy a proper manuscript book for me to write my list in." "Oh, but must I do that tonight and leave you all alone?" "You can go and come back within an hour and a half," said Annie, "and I want some other things, too, lots of cottons and needles, and some black lining for that new dress which I am going to make for you." "Oh, my darling, you are kind. And some oil for the sewing machine, in fact, a whole list of things. You may as well get 'em all while you are about it, Shelfie, do you hear? But I hate leaving you. And why should not I be left for an hour or an hour and a half, or even 2 hours? Do go, dear, and get me the book. I want it dreadfully badly." Annie, after a great deal more coaxing, after a vast amount of arguments and pretty smiles and pathetic gestures, had, as she knew she would have, her own way. Mrs. Shelf owned that her dear young lady's whim was a just one, that there was no possible harm in leaving her for even a couple of hours at the rectory while she drove into Rashleigh to get the necessary things. It was scarcely 4 o'clock yet, and she could be back certainly not later than 7 o'clock. She could unfasten Rover, the watchdog, and leave him loose in the yard. Therefore Annie would be quite safe even if any marauders did appear round the premises. But as burglaries were things unknown in the peaceful parish of Rashleigh, Mrs. Shelf was not at all afraid of anything happening to Annie in her solitude. "If I must, I must," she said. "You are a very masterful young lady, but I will own I shall rather enjoy a breath of the air this fine evening. Only why should not you come with me, lovey? Why not? You could drive, and Dan could look after the house. Now why not, Miss Annie, dear? It would do you a sight of good." "No, no, Shelfie, I couldn't bear it. You don't suppose I can see people yet after my dear uncle's?" Her voice trembled, her eyes filled with real tears. "Very well, dear," said Mrs. Shelf. "I am sorry I mentioned it, my pet. Well then, I will be off. You will be sure to give yourself a cozy tea, Annie, and I'll be back, at the latest at 7, if not before." Dan was summoned, the old horse was put to the old gig which had been used so often by the rector, and Mrs. Shelf and Dan drove smartly out of the yard. Annie was alone in the house. "I have succeeded," she said to herself. She did not know whether her pain at the thought of all that lay before her and at the final severance of the ties of her entire life was as keen as her pleasure at the thought of escaping from her greatest fears. She knew she had very little time to spare. Mrs. Shelf was a quick sort of woman, not at all gossipy, and she would be certainly anxious at the thought of Annie staying behind alone. But the girl, bad as she was, felt that she could not go away forever without doing one last thing, and a moment later, in her black dress, with her fair hair tumbling loosely about her neck and shoulders, for she had let it down while helping Shelfie in the kitchen, she ran into the garden, and picking a great quantity of large white lilies, pursued her way along a narrow path until she reached a wicket gate which led into the old churchyard. Soon the girl in her black dress, with her fair face and her lovely golden hair, was kneeling by a newly made grave. She laid the lilies on the grave, pressed her lips, not once, but many times, against the fragrant flowers, and said in a choked, husky, agonized voice, "Goodbye, Uncle Maurice, goodbye forever and ever. Ask God to tell you everything. Goodbye, Uncle Maurice," and then she came back to the house. There was now nothing more to be done except to write a letter to Mrs. Shelf. "Dear Shelfie," wrote Annie on a piece of black-edged paper, "I have gone away. I sent you to Rashleigh on purpose. You won't ever find me again, for I am going to a part of the world where no one will know me. I shall lead my own life and perhaps be happy. Please forget me, Shelfie, and tell John Saxon to do the same, and when you hear all the wicked, dreadful stories that you will hear about me, try to believe that I am sorry now, and would be different if I could, but I can't. Try, too, to believe that I will never forget Uncle Maurice nor the old place. Goodbye, Shelfie, darling. Annie." This letter was not left where it could be immediately discovered, but was put with great discrimination and craft by Annie in Mrs. Shelf's workbox, which she knew the old lady would be scarcely likely to open that night, but would most assuredly look into on the following day. Thus she would have a longer time to escape, for when Mrs. Shelf came back and found that Annie was not in the house, she would naturally wait for a little before she began to search for her at all. For Annie all her life had been fond of prowling about in the dusk. Thus her escape was practically assured. Chapter 26. Dawson's shop. When Mrs. Shelf arrived at Rashleigh she made haste to carry out her commissions. These she executed with her accustomed dispatch, and would have been back at the rectory some time before 7 o'clock but for a little event which took place in no less a shop than Dawson the butcher's. Mrs. Shelf, having bought the manuscript book and the other odds and ends which Annie required, suddenly thought that she might as well choose the meat and small dainties which would be necessary for the reduced family at the rectory during the next few days. Accordingly she desired Dan to take her to Dawson's, and getting slowly and ponderously down out of the gig, she entered the shop. Dawson himself was present, and came forward with much respect and alacrity to serve his well-known customer. "Glad to see you out, Mrs. Shelf," he said. "The air will do you good, ma'am. The evenings are turning a bit nippy, aren't they? Autumn coming on all too quickly. Ah, Mrs. Shelf. And winter follows autumn just as death follows old age. We don't know ourselves without the rector, Mrs. Shelf. No wonder that you feel it, no wonder. Perhaps I ought not to have spoken of it. But you'll come in now and have a cup of tea with my wife, won't you, Mrs. Shelf?" "No, that I can't," said Mrs. Shelf, quickly wiping away the tears which had sprung to her eyes at mention of the beloved name. "I must hurry back to Miss Annie, she is all alone, poor little thing." "At the rectory." "Is she, now?" said Dawson. "Well, now, and a sweetly pretty young lady she be. Of course you don't want to leave her by herself. But isn't that nice-looking young gentleman, her cousin, staying with you for a time?" "Mr. Saxon, you mean?" said Mrs. Shelf. "So he be, but he had to go up to London on business this morning. No, Miss Annie and I are by ourselves for the time. Now I want please, Mr. Dawson, 2 pounds of your best rump steak and a piece of kidney for a pudding, and 1.5 pounds of the best end of neck of mutton. That's about all today. We shan't be wanting as much meat as formerly, and perhaps, Mr. Dawson, you wouldn't mind sending in your account in the course of the next week or so, for Mr. Saxon is anxious to square up everything for Miss Annie before he leaves for Australia." "I will see about the account," said Dawson. "And now, that reminds me. I was going to speak about it before, only the dear rector was so ill, I couldn't worrit him. But the fact is, I changed a cheque for £20 for Miss Annie about a month ago. I can't remember the exact date. The cheque was one of Mr. Brooks, and as correct as possible. Miss Annie wanted it in gold, and I gave it to her, and the following Monday I sent Pearson, my foreman, round with it to the bank, and in some way the stupid fellow tore it so badly that they would not cash it, and said they must have a new cheque. Of course I would have gone to the rector, knowing that he would give it to me, but for his illness. Now, however, I should like to have my money back. Shall I add it to the account, or what would be the best way to manage it, Mrs. Shelf?" "But I can't make out what you are driving at," said Mrs. Shelf. "Has Miss Annie asked you to cash a cheque for her, a cheque of the master's for £20? "She certainly did. Let me see when the date was. It was a day or two after she came back from school, looking so bonny and bright, and, by the same token, Mr. Brooke was taken ill that very day, and Miss Annie was sent into town in a hurry to get some things that you wanted for the master." "But," said Mrs. Shelf, then she checked herself. A queer beating came at her heart and a heaviness before her eyes. "Perhaps," she said, sinking into a chair, "you would let me see the cheque that is so much torn that you can't get it cashed." "I will, with pleasure, ma'am. I am sorry to worry you at all about it at the present moment, but you seem the best person to talk to, being, so to speak, not exactly one of the family. Show me the check and don't worry me with my exact relations to the family, said Mrs. Shelf with dignity. Dawson accordingly went to his private safe, which he unlocked, and taking out a ponderous banker's book, produced the check, which Mrs. Shelf immediately recognized as one which Mr. Brooke had written in order to pay the half-yearly meat bill. The check had been badly torn, and was fastened together at the back with some stamped paper. They won't take it, they are mighty particular about these things, said Dawson. It has been a loss to me, lying out of my money, but I wouldn't worry the dear old gentleman when he was ill for 3 times the amount. And you say that Miss Annie brought you this? Didn't she bring you an account or anything with it? Not she. She asked me if I would cash it for her. You see, it was made payable to bearer, not to me myself. Is there anything wrong about it, Mrs. Shelf? Not the least bit in the world, said the bewildered woman, trying to keep back a rash of words from her lips. The master thought the world of our dear Miss Annie, and doubtless gave it to her the day after she returned from school, for she has a pretty, coaxing way, and you know well, Mr. Dawson, that young things like our Annie want their bits of finery. To be sure, said Dawson. I gave her the money without a thought. But your bill, I was under the impression that your bill for the last 6 months was met. Bless you, madam, you may rest easy about that. It was Miss Annie herself brought me the money and asked me to give her a receipt for the bill. She brought it 2 days later in £5 notes. You have the receipt, haven't you? To be sure, at least, I suppose so. I am all in a bewilderment, said the good woman. She certainly looked so, and Dawson glanced after her as she left the shop with a very solemn expression of face. Just as she crossed the threshold she turned back to say, "You will have another check instead of that as soon as the will is proved. You understand, of course, that there is a short delay always on account of those blessed lawyers when a death takes place," said Mrs. Shelf. Yes, madam, I quite understand that, and I think the best thing for me to do is to add the £20 to my bill which you have asked me to send you. Yes, perhaps you are right, Mr. Dawson, said Mrs. Shelf, and she got soberly and laboriously back into the gig. During her drive home Mrs. Shelf did not utter a single word. To say that she was puzzled, amazed, frightened, would but inadequately explain the situation. Her heart beat with dull fear. Annie had cashed her uncle's check, that check which had been drawn to pay the butcher's bill. Annie had cashed it for herself and had not paid the bill. But, again, Annie had paid the bill 2 days later, not with the check, but with Bank of England notes. Really, the thing was too inexplicable. It did not look at all nice. Mrs. Shelf, somehow, felt that it did not, but of course the child would explain. She would speak to her about it, and Annie would tell her. At present she could not understand it. Annie had taken £20 of her uncle's money, but then, again, Annie had restored it, and almost immediately. It's enough to split anybody's brain even to think the thing over, was the good woman's comment as, stiff and cold and tired and inexplicably saddened, she entered the desolate rectory. Rover, the watchdog, had made no noise when Annie had slipped away. He was still in the yard, and ran joyfully to meet the old woman. She stopped for a minute to fondle him, but she had no heart tonight even to pet Rover. She entered the house by the back way, and immediately called Annie's name. There was no response, and the chill and darkness of the house seemed to fall over her like a pall. A week ago, in very truth, peace had reigned here, but now peace had given way to tumults without and fears within. The very air seemed full of conflict. Mrs. Shelf called Annie's name again. Then she set to work to light the lamps and stir up the kitchen fire. She put fresh coals on it and stood for a minute enjoying the pleasant warmth. She was not frightened, not yet at least, at Annie's not responding to her cry. Annie Brooke was a queer creature, and as likely as not was in the garden. There was one thing certain, that if she had remained in the house she would have lit the lamps and made herself comfortable. She was the sort of girl who adored comfort. She liked the luxuries of life, and always chose the warmest corner and the snuggest seat in any room which she entered. Mrs. Shelf looked at the clock which ticked away solemnly in the corner, and was dismayed to find that it was very nearly 8. How stupid of her to stay such a long time at Dawson's. No wonder Annie was tired at the lonely house. Dan came in after having done what was necessary for the horse, and asked Mrs. Shelf if there was anything more he could do for her. Mrs. Shelf said, no, in a testy voice. Dan was a clumsy youth, and she did not want him about the premises. You can go home, she said. Be here in time in the morning, for Mr. John may want you to drive to the station early for him. There is no saying when he will be back. We will have a wire or a letter in the morning, though." Dan stumbled through the scullery and out into the yard. A minute or two afterwards the fastening of the yard gates was heard, and the sound of Dan's footsteps dying away in the country lane. "Poor child," thought Mrs. Shelf. "That story of Dawson's is a caution, if ever there was one, to cash the check for herself and to bring the money back in 2 days. My word, she do beat creation. Nevertheless, poor lamb, she had best explain it her own way. I'd be the last to think hardly of her, who have had more or less the rearing of her, and she the light of that blessed saint's eyes. She will explain it to me. It's only one of her little, clever dodges for frightening people. She was always good at that, but, all the same, I wish she would come in. Goodness, it's past 8. I'll get her supper ready for her." Mrs. Shelf prepared a very appetizing meal. She laid the table in a cozy corner of the kitchen, then she went ponderously through the house, drawing down blinds and fastening shutters. After a time she returned to the kitchen. Still no Annie, and the supper was spoiling in the oven. To waste good food was a sore grief to Mrs. Shelf's honest heart. "Drat the girl," she said to herself impatiently, "why don't she come out of the garden? Now I am feeling, what with nursing and grief, a touch of my old enemy the rheumatics, and I'll have to go out in the damp and cold calling to her. But there, I mustn't think of myself, he never did, bless him." The old woman wrapped a shawl about her head and shoulders, and opening the kitchen door, she passed through the yard into the beautiful garden. It was a moonlight night, and she could see across the lawns and over the flower beds. The place looked ghostly and still and white, for there was a slight hoarfrost and the air was crisp and very chill. "Annie, Annie, Annie," called Mrs. Shelf. "Come in, my dear, come in, my love. Your supper is waiting for you." No answer of any sort. Mrs. Shelf went down the broad center path and called again, "Annie, Annie, Annie." But now echo took up her words, and "Annie, Annie, Annie" came mockingly back on her ears. She felt a sudden sense of fright, and a swift and certain knowledge that Annie was not in the garden. She went back to the house, chilled to the bone and thoroughly frightened. As she did so she remembered John Saxon's words, that she was to take very great and special care of Annie. Oh, how mad she had been to leave her alone for 2 hours and a half. And how queer and persistent of Annie to send her away. What did it mean? Did it mean anything or nothing at all? "Oh God, help me," thought the poor old woman. She sat down in a corner of the warm kitchen, clasping her hands on her knees and looking straight before her. Where was Annie? On the kitchen table she had laid a pile of the little things which she had bought at rashly by Annie's direction. Mechanically she remembered that she had supplied herself with some spools of cotton. She drew her work-box towards her, and opening it, prepared to drop them in. Lying just over a neatly folded piece of cambric which the old woman had been embroidering lay Annie's note. Mrs. Shelf took it up, staggered towards the lamp, and read it. She read it once, she read it twice. She was alone in the house, absolutely alone, and no one knew, and, brave old lady, she never told anyone to her dying day that after reading that note she had fainted dead away, and had lain motionless for a long time on the floor of the kitchen, that kitchen which Annie's light footfall, as she firmly believed, would never enter again. Chapter 27. A Defender. When Annie left the Beau Séjour at Zermatt, Mabel felt herself in a state of distressing weakness and uncertainty. Annie had been her prop, and, as she had expressed it, she could not possibly go on being wicked without her. Accordingly, when the loss of the necklace was revealed to Lady Lushington on the following morning, Mabel let out a great deal more with regard to the loss of that treasure than Annie had intended her to do. She said nothing to deteriorate its value, but murmured so vaguely that she had certainly put it into the old trunk, and looked so sheepish when she was saying the words, that Lady Lushington began to suspect the truth. "Now, Mabel," she said, taking her niece's hand and drawing her towards the light, "you are not at all good at concealing things, you have not the cleverness of your friend. I have for some time had my suspicions with regard to that quondam friend of yours, Annie Brooke. I don't want you to betray her in any sense of the word, but I will know this, are you telling me the truth about the necklace? Did you put it into the lid of the trunk?" Mabel prevaricated, stammered, blushed, and was forced to admit that she had not done so. On the top of this revelation, Lady Lushington was quick in pressing her niece to make a further one, and at last Mabel admitted that she thought, but was not at all sure, that Mr. Manchuri, the old Jewish gentleman who had been staying at the Hotel Bellevue, knew something about the necklace. It is quite safe, I am certain it is quite safe, said Mabel, but I think he knows about it. Had not we better write and ask Annie? We will do nothing of the kind, said Lady Lushington. Mabel, I am disgusted with you. You can go away to your room. You are my niece, or I would never speak to you again, but if I do not get to the bottom of this mystery, and pretty quickly, too, my name is not Henrietta Lushington. Oh dear, thought poor Mabel, what awful mischief I have done. Annie will be wild. Still, all is not known. I don't think Aunt Henrietta can think the very worst of me even if she does learn the story of the necklace. That won't tell her how I won the prize, and that won't explain to her the true story of Mrs. Priestley's bill. As Mabel was leaving the room, very downcast and fearfully miserable, Lady Lushington called her back. I am disgusted with you, she repeated. Notwithstanding, justice is justice. I never wish you to have anything more to do with Annie Brooke. You never shall speak to her again, if I can help it. But in one thing she was right. I have received Mrs. Priestley's bill thin mourning with all due apologies, and begging of me to forgive her for having, through a most gross error, and owing to the fault of one of her assistants, added another lady's account to mine. Your bill for clothes, therefore, Mabel, only amounts to £40, which is high, but allowable. As you are not going back to the school, we shall never require Mrs. Priestley's services again. I will send her a cheque today for £40, and that closes my transactions with a woman, whom, notwithstanding apologies, I do not consider too straight. Even this small consolation was better than nothing to Mabel. She went away to her room feeling very queer and trembling, and Lady Lushington took those immediate steps which she was fond of doing when really aroused. She did not know Mr. Manchury's private address, but she was well aware that he was a wealthy Bond Street jeweller. She wrote, therefore, straight to his place of business, and her letter, when it reached him, electrified the good man to such an extent that he scarcely knew what he was doing. Fortunately for himself, he had not yet sold the necklace. Having read the letter, he sank down into a chair and gazed before him. Well did he remember the scene when Annie, looking sweet, innocent, and charming, had told him with a little pride of her knowledge with regard to gems, and had shown him with extreme diffidence the valuable necklace, and asked him what it was worth. What a fool I was to snap at it, he said to himself. I might have known that no honest girl of the class of Annie Brooke would have £40 to spend on jewelry. But just that hateful desire to make money came over me, and I grabbed at the thing. Now what is to be done? Mr. Manchury returned home early that day. Lady Lushington's letter was burning a hole all the time in his pocket. What a comfort it is, he said to himself, that dear, nice Priscilla is still in the house. She certainly told me nothing about the necklace. That little horror of an Annie Brooke begged and implored of me to keep the whole thing a secret. But the time has come, my young miss, when I fed absolutely absolved from my promise. I must consult Prisky. Prisky has as wise a head on her shoulders as even my own beloved Esther had. The old man entered the house, and Priscilla, who was busily reading in the library, hearing the click of the latchkey in the lock, ran out into the hall. Her face had improved during the last few days. The look of great anxiety had left it. She had, in short, made up her mind, but even Mr. Manchury did not quite know what Priscilla was going to do. You were in early, she said, running to meet him and helping him off with his overcoat and putting his stick in the stand. Yes, Priscilla, he answered, and I am right glad you are in. The fact is, I came back to consult you, my dear. You will have some tea first, said Priscilla. Now that is exactly what Esther would have said, was the old man's response. What a fuss she did make about me, to be sure. And you are going to make a fool of me now. I was a young man when my Esther was there, and I am an old man now, but the difference seems bridged over, and I feel young once more with you so kind to me, Priscilla. But there, my child, there is no tea for me until I relieve my mind. Where were you sitting, my dear, when you heard me come into the house? In the library. I had just discovered the most glorious edition of Don Quixote, and was reveling in it. We will go back to the library, Priscilla, if you have no objection. Priscilla turned at once, Mr. Manchury followed her, and they entered the great library full of books of all sorts, rare editions, old folios, etc., as well as a few really valuable pictures. Priscilla, said Mr. Manchury, you know all about Annie Brooke. Yes, said Priscilla, her face turning very pale. I wanted to write to Annie, her dear uncle is dead. You told me so a few days ago. You can write or not, just as you please. In the meantime, can you explain this? As Mr. Manchery spoke, he took Lady Lushington's letter from his pocket and handed it to Priscilla. Priscilla read the following words. Dear Sir, I regret to have to trouble you with regard to a small circumstance, but I have just to my unbounded astonishment, been informed by my niece, Mabel Lushington, that you can throw light on the disappearance of an old-fashioned pearl necklace set in silver which I bought for her at Interlaken the day before we left. I was assisted in the purchase by a girl who was of our party, a Miss Brooke. She professed to have a knowledge of gems, and took me to Zick's shop in the High Street where I bought the trinket. I paid £40 for it, believing it to be a bargain of some value. At present the necklace is not forthcoming, and there has been an idea circulated in the hotel that it was stolen on our journey from Interlaken to Zermatt. My niece, however, now with great reluctance mentions your name, and says that she thinks you can explain the mystery. Will you be kind enough to do so without a moment's loss of time? Yours sincerely, Henrietta Lushington. When Priscilla had finished this letter she raised a white and startled face. Her eyes saw Mr. Manchery's, who, on his part, was trying to read her through. What do you make of it? He said. I never heard of the necklace, she said. Well, perhaps you heard something else or you noticed something else. Were you sitting in the garden of the Hotel Bellevue just before Dejuna on the day that you and I left Interlaken? Yes, said Priscilla. I remember quite well now, considered the old man, that I noticed you from where I myself was sitting on the terrace. I saw Miss Brooke go up to you, and presently you went away. Then I joined Miss Brooke. Yes, said Priscilla. You have not the least idea what occurred, have you, Priscilla, when Miss Brooke and I were alone? I have not the faintest idea, said Priscilla. Well, I will tell you, said the old man. He crossed the room as he spoke, opened the door, and went out, but presently returned with something in his hand. This something he laid on the table before Priscilla. Have you ever seen that before? Never, said Priscilla. It is rather pretty. It is a valuable old ornament, said Mr. Manchery. It was bought at Zick's shop in the High Street at Interlaken. I gave Annie Brooke £100 for it. Mr. Manchery. She told me it was her own, and asked if I would buy it. I knew it was worth a good deal more than the sum I paid her. Now it seems that she took me in. I have purchased Lady Lushington's necklace. It never belonged to Annie Brooke. What is to be done? Priscilla sat, white as death, with her hands clasped before her. Did you ever, she said at last after a very long pause, notice in all your knowledge of mankind how from the beginning of a little act of deceit great and awful things take place? If I had not yielded to a temptation which was put before me at Mrs. Littleton's school, Annie would never have been a thief, there would have been no need. Mr. Manchery, I feel that I am responsible for this. Nothing of the kind, child. Please don't take on in that way. It is too dreadful to hear you. Priscilla's lips trembled. We must save Annie Brooke, she said. She is in trouble. Her uncle is dead, she has no home any longer. Oh, Mr. Manchery, for the sake of your Esther, don't be too hard on her. I am just mad with rage, said the old jeweler. There are some things I can stand, but not deceit. You can stand me, said Priscilla very gently, and yet I was deceitful. You have repented, child, and you are going to do all in your power to show that your repentance is real. I will not have you and Annie Brooke spoken of on the same footing. I cannot bear it, Priscilla. You will be kind to her, repeated Priscilla. I must answer this good woman's letter. I have got the necklace. I don't choose to be at the loss of £100. There are things I will not bear, I cannot and will not stand, even for you, Priscilla. I have been cheated by that girl, and have lost £100 on a trinket which I now cannot possibly sell. If Lady Lushington will send me that sum, she can have the necklace back, otherwise Miss Brooke herself must return the money. Priscilla was surprised and most distressed at the obduracy of the old man. In the end she could only persuade him to write to John Saxon, whose name she knew well. It would be better for him to be acquainted with this ghastly fact than for Lady Lushington's just indignation to be turned on Annie's devoted head. Accordingly John Saxon was written to, and thus the explanation of his sudden visit to London was arrived at. Mr. Manchery had asked the young man to meet him at his house of business, and Saxon, much as he dreaded what might lie before him, little guessed the ghastly news which he was to hear. Mr. Manchery, affectionate as he was to Priscilla, nursed his wrath more and more against Annie during the hours which intervened between his receiving Lady Lushington's letter and the arrival of John Saxon on the scene. I am glad you have come, Mr. Saxon, he said when the young man entered the old jeweller's private sitting room, which was situated at the back of the business premises. Yes, I came at once, replied Saxon. What is it you want with me, Mr. Manchuri? You said you had something important to tell me with regard to my cousin, Miss Brooke. Something very ugly to tell you, sir. Now listen, what do you make of this story? Saxon did listen while Mr. Manchuri enlarged on Annie's apparently innocent, wheedling ways, on her story with regard to the necklace, and on the fact that he had given her in exchange for it 10 notes, each of the value of £10. £100 in all, said the old jeweller, and, to tell you the truth, Mr. Saxon, cheap at the price, for I could sell that necklace tomorrow for £250, or even 300. Mark you, my dear young sir, I could do it, but you could not, nor could she, sharp as she is, for I know the trade and you don't, and she doesn't, and Lady Lushington doesn't. Therefore £100 is a very fair sum to pay for what only cost her ladyship 40. Now, will you read that? He added, handing him Lady Lushington's letter. John Saxon did so. He returned it and looked full into the face of Mr. Manchuri. Well, sir, said the merchant, what do you mean to do? What do you mean to do, Mr. Manchuri? Mr. Manchuri spread out his hands. He said, I mean to take the law in this matter. I mean to write the simple and exact truth to Lady Lushington, and I mean to confront that precious Miss Brooke with the truth. That is what I mean to do. That sort of wickedness ought not to be permitted, sir. It ought to be nipped in the bud. I agree with you, said Saxon. He spoke very slowly, and with pain. It ought to be nipped in the bud, and I am, a lamp came to his throat, almost glad that you have made this discovery. There would be nothing quite so dreadful for my poor little cousin as that this thing should be hidden. Now it is known, soon a great deal more will be known, of that I am persuaded. But, sir, I want to plead with you on behalf of the guilty party. In the first place, the girl in question is only 17. Her exceeding youth, which ought to be the shield of innocence, has not proved sufficient to keep her from acting in the most crafty and guilty manner. But she was the beloved child of one of the beat of men, and for his sake I will not have her name dragged in the dust. If I can save her from the world's knowledge of such a grave crime as this, I will. Mr. Manchuri, you have lost £100. Here is my check for the amount. Here John Saxon took a checkbook from his pocket. Give me a pen and ink, he said, and I will fill it in for you. Having received this, will you return the necklace to Lady Lushington, telling her any story you please, but as far as possible shielding Annie Brooke from the worst consequences of her sin. This makes all the difference, sir, said Mr. Manchuri. I am not appointed in any sense to be the guardian of Miss Annie Brooke. I wish never to see the young lady again. She has acted abominably. I will take your check, sir, and return the necklace to Lady Lushington. So far, so good. Then perhaps this ends our business, said John Saxon. He took up his hat as he spoke. Not quite sure, there are not other things I wish to say. Will you sit down? Saxon very unwillingly complied. You have, perhaps, continued Mr. Manchuri, heard Miss Brooke speak of a schoolfellow of the name of Priscilla Weir. I have. I believe the young lady was with her and Miss Lushington in Switzerland. That is true, said Mr. Manchuri, and I had the privilege, I was, in short, the fortunate man to be allowed to escort Miss Weir back to England. Indeed, said Saxon, who, terribly shocked at this story about poor Annie, could with difficulty bring himself to take the slightest interest in Priscilla. You have told me, sir, that Miss Brooke's uncle is dead. Saxon bowed his head. Mr. Manchuri gazed hard at the young man. Your father was my good friend, he said, a softer note coming into his voice, and I have always thoroughly respected you. Your father and I have transacted business, and you yourself have shown me hospitality in a distant part of the world. I would not be unkind to you, Mr. Saxon, and I pity you very much indeed because of your relationship to Miss Brooke. Pray do not pity me, said Saxon. If a man of my age, I am 28, cannot do has beat for a lonely girl, almost a child, he must be a poor sort. I am Annie's guardian, and will do my utmost as long as she lives to befriend her. Sir, I must speak the truth, said Mr. Manchuri. You are straight as a die and honest and open as the day, but that girl is crafty, insincere, essentially untrue. You can never turn staff of that sort into true gold, however hard you try. I can at least protect a weak and erring girl, said Saxon with feeling. The best thing you can possibly do for her, sir, is to get her out of England and away from her old friends, for she must never return to Mrs. Littleton's school. Why so? Asked Saxon. It was my privilege, Mr. Saxon, to escort Priscilla Weir back to England. She had been very little noticed by me or by anyone else while at Interlaken. But I think, if I may dare to say the word, that God took care of her, and she alone of all that party really enjoyed the glories of nature. For her the Jungfrau showed some of its majesty, and for her the other great mountains spoke unutterable secrets. She is a queer girl, but has a heart of gold, Mr. Saxon, a heart of gold. Now that girl first attracted my attention because they resembled a child of my own, a child who has long lived with the angels. I can scarcely tell you what I felt when I saw the likeness, and since then I have probed into Priscilla's heart and found that in all respects it resembles the heart of my Esther. Sir, the girl was lonely, she was subjected to temptation, and she yielded to it. She has told me about it, and when Mrs. Littleton's school opens it will be Priscilla's painful duty to tell her mistress something which implicates very seriously your cousin, Miss Brooke. It also implicates Miss Lushington. Priscilla is a guest in my house now. What she will be eventually I have not yet disclosed to her. It is my impression that Esther sent her to me, and I am not going to let her go in a hurry. Yes, this is very interesting, and I am glad that a girl so worthy as Miss Weir should have found a friend in you, was Saxon's response. But you have not explained what my cousin Annie has done. No, it is not within my province. But I can only assure you that that unfortunate young lady has got herself, as well as 2 more of her schoolfellows, namely, Priscilla Weir and Mabel Lushington, into the most horrible scrape. Priscilla's conscience will not allow her to live any longer under the load of unconfessed sin, and it is her duty to inform Mrs. Littleton. And me, said Saxon in a determined voice. You must be patient, sir. I will not tell you Priscilla's secrets. They are her own. But I should advise you immediately to take steps to remove Miss Brooke from Mrs. Littleton's school. Saxon said a few words more, and then took his leave. He had a good deal of business to attend to that day in connection with the late Mr. Brooke's affairs. The winding up of his small property and the paying of a few trifling outstanding bills must be attended to as soon as possible. But Annie, what was to be done with her? Saxon himself intended to return to Australia within a month. His business called him there, and he did not think he ought to delay. But what was to become of Annie? She must not return to school, indeed, her circumstances forbade such a hurry. Would it be possible to settle her somewhere with Mrs. Shelf? Saxon thought over this idea, but dismissed it. Annie was far too clever to be left in the hands of a person whom she could completely rule. The young man felt stunned at the depth of her wickedness. He spent a very anxious night, and returned by an early train. On the following morning to Rashley. There he was met by the appalling information that Annie had gone. It was Dan who first told him at the station. Dan blurted out the words, almost sobbing as he spoke. Mrs. Shelf was so bad that she couldn't speak. She was lying in the kitchen, where a neighbor had found her when she had come in the morning. The poor woman was moaning to herself in the most dreadful way. Dan knew no particulars except that Miss Annie was nowhere to be found and that Mrs. Shelf was ill. Really, thought Saxon, troubles thicken. I wonder when we shall see a gleam of daylight. Was there ever such a troublesome and terrible girl put into the world before? But the very greatness of the emergency roused all that was strongest and best in the young man. He soon got the truth out of poor Mrs. Shelf, who blamed herself almost more than Annie for having gone to Rashley. Having tried to assure the poor old woman that she was not in fault, and that he was wrong not to have insisted on taking Annie with him to London, he further soothed her by saying that he would soon find Annie, that it was absolutely impossible for a young girl like Annie Brooke to lose herself in these days of clever detectives and patient investigations. We'll have her back, he said. We'll have her back, and you must get well. And now, I am going immediately, yes, immediately, to take steps. You must have a neighbor in to look after you, Mrs. Shelf, and I will write you or send a telegram whenever I get news. But oh, sir, there is something else on my mind, said Mrs. Shelf, and she told him the story of Dawson and the check. Oh, that is all right, said Saxon in a cheery voice. We will settle the matter with Dawson as soon as ever letters of administration have been taken out with regard to Mr. Brooke's will. Don't fret any more about that and don't blame poor little Annie more than you can help, Mrs. Shelf. Mrs. Shelf burst into tears. It was a relief to her to hear the manly voice and to feel the confident pressure of the strong young hand. If John Saxon could be cheery and hopeful about Annie, why should she despair? When he was gone, and he left the house almost immediately afterwards, Mrs. Shelf rose totteringly from the sofa in the old kitchen and began to potter about her work. All was not lost even for Annie Brooke, while John Saxon was there to defend and help her. Chapter 28. Tilda Freeman. It was a very tired Annie Brooke who arrived laden with her little bag late on a certain evening at Norton Paget. The darkness had quite set in, and when she entered the tiny station and took a third-class ticket to London she was not recognized. There were 2 other girls of an inferior class to Annie going also to London by the train. She looked at them for a minute, but they did not know her, and when presently she found herself in the same carriage with them, she felt a certain sense of repose in being in their company. But for the fact that these 2 girls were accompanying her to town, she would have given way to quite unreasoning terrors, for her nerves had been violently shaken by the events of the last fortnight. Those nerves had been weakened already by all the deceit through which she had lived now during long weeks. This final step, however, made her feel almost as though she had reached the breaking point. She could have cried out in her fears. She hated the darkness, she hated the swift movement of the train. She wanted to reach London, and yet when she did get there she would not have the faintest idea where to go. With her money securely fastened about her little person, with her neat leather bag, she might have presented herself at any comfortable hotel and been sure of a good welcome, but somehow Annie felt afraid of grand hotels at that moment. She felt deep down, very deep in her heart that she was nothing more nor less than a runaway, a girl who had done something to be ashamed of, who was obliged to hide herself, and who was forced to leave her friends. She shivered once or twice with cold, and one of the girls who had got into the same carriage, and who had stared very hard at Annie from time to time, noticing her great dejection and pallor and her want of any wraps, suddenly bent forward and said, "If you please, miss, I have a cloak to spare, and if you're taken with a chill I'd be very glad to lend it to you to wrap about you." "Thank you," said Annie instantly. Her small teeth were beginning to chatter, and she was really glad of the girl's offer. A few minutes later she was wrapped up in the cloak, and feeling inexpressibly soothed and knowing that her disguise was now more effectual than ever, she dropped into an uneasy sleep. She slept for some time, and when she awoke again she found that the third-class compartment was full of people, a rough and motley crew, and that the 2 girls who had accompanied her into the carriage were both still present. One faced her, the other sat pressed up close to her side. It was the girl who had lent Annie the cloak who sat so near her. "Are you a bit better, miss?" she said when Annie had opened her startled blue eyes and tried to collect her scattered senses. "Oh yes," said Annie, "but I am thirsty," she added. "Suck an orange, then, said the girl. "They are a bit sour yet, but I bought some today for the journey." She immediately thrust her hand into a string bag and produced an unripe and very untempting-looking specimen of the orange tribe. Annie took it and said, "Thank you." "Lor, bless you," said the girl, "but your hands is hot." "No, I am not hot at all," said Annie, "I am more cold than hot." "Thank you so much for the orange. How kind you are." The girl looked at Annie with great admiration and curiosity. Then she bent forward and whispered to her companion. They consulted together for a few minutes in low tones which could not possibly reach Annie's ears owing to the swift-going motion of the train. Then the girl who was seated opposite to Annie bent towards her and said, "Ain't you Miss Annie Brooke of Rashley Rectory?" This remark so took Annie by surprise and so completely upset her already tottering nerves that she gave a sudden cry and said in a sort of smothered voice, "Oh, please, please don't betray me." The girl now nodded to her companion, and the girl who was seated close to Annie said in a low, soothing tone, "We ain't goin' to tell on yer, miss. If yer want to go up to town unbeknown to them as has the charge o' yer, 'tain't no affair o' ours. I'm Tilda Freeman, and that 'ere girl is Martha Jones. I am a Lunnon gel, and Lunnon bred, and I was down on a wisit to my friend Martha Jones. She's comin' up with me for a bit to see the big town. Be you acquainted with Lunnon, miss, and do you know its ways?" "No, I don't know London very well," said Annie. She had recovered some of her self-possession by this time. "You are mistaken in supposing," she continued, trying to speak in as cheerful a tone as she could, "that I am going away privately from my friends. I have lost my dear uncle, and am obliged to go to London on business." "Yes, miss," said Martha Jones, "and you has peeled off your mournin'. You was in black when we seed you at the funeral. And why has yer come up by the night train, and why has yer taken a third-class ticket? And why do you ask us not to betray you? Don't you tell no lies, miss, and you'll be told no stories. You're runnin' away, and there's no sayin' but that it, 'aven't you somethin' to do with Dawson the butcher?" "Dawson," said Annie, her heart beginning to beat very hard. "Dawson's in a rare way about a cheque which, 'e cashed for yer, miss. 'E can't get 'is money back. Now Mrs. Dawson is own sister to my mother, and we know all about it. There, Miss Tilda and me, we don't want to be hard on a young lady like you, and if you would confide in us, you would find us your good friends. There ain't no manner o' use, miss, in your doin' anything else, for we can soon send a bit o' a letter to Aunt Jane Dawson, and then the fat's in the fire. Oh, said Annie, she roused herself, she pushed back her hat, she pressed her hot hand to her hot cheek. Do you think we might open a little bit of the window? She said. Tilda immediately complied. There now, she said, that's better. Didn't I say as you was 'ot, and no wonder. You tell Martha and me, and we'll do what we can for yer. I don't know what you mean about a check, said Annie, that is all nonsense, I mean, I am not going away on that account. Oh no, miss, said Tilda, winking at Martha. Who ever said you was? But you were right, continued Annie, I am going to town for a day or two, just, on a little business of my own. Ain't we smart, said Tilda, winking again at Martha. Martha bent forward, and once more whispered in her companion's ear. Look, said Tilda, when all's said and done, you're a gel, same as we two are gels, and although you is, IGH up in the social scale, and we, so to speak, low down, we are made with the same feelin's, and souls and bodies, and all the rest o' it, and it ain't for Martha and me to be hard on yer, miss, we would much more like to help yer, miss. We won't get to London until close on 12, law, bless yer. That ain't a nice time for a young lady to come all alone to the metropolis, 'tain't a nice time at all, but my brother Sam, I'll meet Martha and me, and take us straight off to Islington, where we lives, and there, I'll be a bit o' 'ot supper, and our beds all warm and cozy, and what I say is this, why mightn't you come along with us too, and share our 'ot supper and the escort of my brother Sam, and, haven't you a shakedown at Islington for the night? There's no safer way to hide, miss, if it's even yer mean, for none o' those grand folks as you belong to will look for yer out Islington way. Annie considered this offer for some little time, and finally said in a grateful tone that she did not think that she could do better than accept it, whereupon the girls whispered and giggled a good deal together and left poor Annie more or less to her own reflections. It was 20 minutes to 12 when the great express entered the huge London terminus which was its destination, and Annie was indeed glad, when she found herself in the whirl of the great Paddington station, to have Tilda's arm to lean on and to be accompanied at the other side by Martha Jones. Presently a large young man with a shock of red hair and a freckled face rushed up to the girls, clapped Tilda loudly on the shoulder, and nodded in a most familiar manner to Martha. At sight of Annie, however, he fell back breathless with astonishment and open-eyed admiration, for perhaps in all her life poor little Annie had never looked more absolutely beautiful than she did now. Her cheeks were slightly crimson with the first touch of fever. Her blue eyes were at once dark and bright, and her coral red lips might have resembled a cherry, so rich was their color. There was a fragility at the same time about the slim young girl, a sort of delicate refinement, which her pretty dress and golden hair accentuated, so that, compared to Tilda, who was loud and coarse and uncommonly like Sam himself, and Martha, who was a plain, dumpy girl with a cast in one eye that looked like a being from a superior sphere. Sam had dreamed of creatures like Annie Brooke. He had believed that it was possible for some girls to look like that, but he had never been close to one of these adorable creatures before in the whole course of his life. His silly head swam, his round eyes became rounder than ever with admiration, and even his loud voice became hushed. Who be she? He said, plucking at Tilda's sleeve, and his own great, rough voice shaking. A friend o' our'n, said Tilda, who, not being so susceptible, felt her head very tightly screwed on her shoulders, and was not going to give herself away on Annie's account. A friend o' our'n, she continued, a gel whose acquaintance we made in the country. She's comin' along, 'ome with Martha and me, so you look after our trunks, Sam, and we'll go on to the underground as quick as possible. Don't stare your eyes out, Sam, for goodness sake. She won't bolt, beauty though she be. Oh, I can't go with you, I really can't, said Annie. There must be a hotel close to this, and I have plenty of money. Perhaps this gentleman would take me to the hotel. She looked appealingly at Sam, who would have died for her there and then. I will, if you wish, miss, he stammered. Nothing of the kind, said Tilda, who, having secured Annie, had no intention of letting her go. A girl with plenty of money who was running away was a treasure not to be found every day in the week. You'll come with us, miss, or that letter, I'll be writ to Mrs. Dawson afore we goes to bed tonight. Oh yes, said Sam, wondering more and more what could have happened. We'll take the greatest care o' yer, miss. Her name's Annie, you needn't, miss, her, said Tilda, turning sharply to her brother. Now then, do get our bits o' duds, and be quick, can't you? The bewildered young man did see to his sister's and friends' luggage. He had already secured Annie's bag, and he held it reverently, feeling certain that it belonged to one of a superior class. Why, the little, neat bag alone was something to reverence. By and by the whole party found themselves in a third-class compartment on their way to Islington, which place they in course of time reached, Sam indulging in a cab for Annie's sake, because he saw that she was far too tired to walk the long mile which separated Tilda Freeman's home from the railway station. This humble domicile was soon reached, and the whole party went indoors. A frowsy-looking woman with red hair like Tilda's and Sam's stood akimbo in the passage, awaiting the arrival of her son and daughter and visitor. "How late you be," she cried. "But there's your supper in the kitchen, and your bed's ready. Howda, Martha Jones? It's a dish o' tripe and onions as ready for yer. I know you're partial to that sort o' food. Why, mercy. Who on earth is this?" "A friend o' mine," said Tilda. "Her name's Annie. She can sleep along o' me tonight, mother." "Oh no," said Annie. "I must have a bed to myself." "Then you can't, my beauty," said Mrs. Freeman, "for there ain't one for yer. If yer thinks Tilda good enough to wise it uninvited in the dead o' night, you must be satisfied with half her bed. And now I'm off to mine, for I avenue to char early tomorrow mornin' at Pearson's house over the way." Mrs. Freeman disappeared, and the girls, accompanied by Sam, went into the kitchen. Annie, try as she would, could not touch the coarse supper, but Tilda, Martha, and even Sam enjoyed it mightily. Annie had removed her hat, and her hair looked like purest gold under the flaring gas jet, which cast a garish light over the place. Sam ate in abundance, and cast adoring eyes at Annie. Annie's head ached, her throat ached, she shivered, but nevertheless, dimly and in a queer sort of fashion, it was borne in upon her that Sam would be her true friend and that the girls would not. She was in an evil plight, but she was already feeling too ill to care very much what happened to her. Nevertheless, she had still a sufficient amount of self-control to return Sam's gaze, and once she gave him a timid smile. By and by the two girls went into the scullery to wash the plates and dishes, for great would have been Mrs. Freeman's wrath if she had found them dirty in the morning, and Sam and Annie were alone. Annie immediately seized the opportunity. "Sam," she said, "I am in great trouble." "I be that sorry," murmured Sam. "I know you have a kind heart, Sam. For you, miss," he managed to stammer. "And you are strong," continued Annie. "I'd knock any chap down as wanted to injure a air o' yer, eed, miss. It's that beautiful, yer, air is, miss, like the sunshine when we spends a day in the country." "Do you think you would really help me, Sam?" said Annie. "You has but to ask, miss," said the red-haired giant, placing a huge hand over his heart. "I don't want your sister and her friend to know. Oh, lawks, miss. You'll turn my eed entirely. A secret atween you and me. Well, I'm that obligated I don't know 'ow to speak." "I want to get away from here tomorrow morning," said Annie. "I want to go down to the docks, Sam." "My word," said Sam. "And I don't know the way," continued Annie. "Do you think that you would come with me and find a ship that is going a long way from England, where you would take a passage for me? A steerage passage, Sam, I can't afford anything else. And lose sight on yer, miss, forever and ever." "Oh, but, Sam, you promised to help me." "My word, and I will," said Sam. "They are coming back," said Annie in a husky voice. "I'll get up early, quite early." "When do you get up, Sam?" "I am off to my work at 5 in the mornin'. How much do you earn a day?" "5 shillin', and good wage, too." "I will give you a whole sovereign if you will stay away from your work and help me tomorrow. Shall we meet outside this house, just outside, at 5 in the morning?" "Oh, my word, yus," said Sam, "and there's no talk o' sovereigns. I'll be jest the greatest pleasure in my whole life to sarve yer, missy." The girls bustled noisily into the kitchen, and Tilda conveyed Annie to her own tiny attic in the roof. Annie refused to undress, but lay down, just as she was, on the hard, uncomfortable bed. For long afterwards she could not quite remember what occurred that night. It was all a horrible nightmare. She was ill, she was dying. Her throat seemed to suffocate her. Every bone in her body ached. She was confronted by ghastly images, unknown and awful terrors pursued her. Something touched her. She screamed. She opened her eyes and recognized Tilda bending over her. What do you want?" she said, for Tilda had just grasped the pocket where the money lay. Nothing, nothing at all, miss, said Tilda. You leave that gel alone, shouted a harsh voice from another attic close by. My word, said Tilda. She sank down, trembling. And I didn't mean to take her money. I am bad, but I ain't as bad as that, only I wanted to see what she has got. She might make a present to Martha and me, but if Sam as took her up, there ain't no chance for none o' us. Towards morning Tilda crept into the other side of the bed and fell into profound slumber. Annie also slept and dreamed and awakened, and slept and dreamed again. Be sure your sin will find you out, she kept repeating under her breath, and then, all of a sudden, when she felt a little, just a little, calmer, a hand was laid on her shoulder, a great rough face bent over her, and a voice said, I say, Missy, it's time for you and me to be off. Annie looked up. The red-haired giant had entered the room and had summoned her. Trembling, shaking, her fever high, her throat almost too sore to allow her to speak, she rose from that horrible bed, tried to shake her tumbled clothes into some sort of order, took up her bag, and followed Sam downstairs. A minute or two later, to her infinite refreshment, they were both out of the house and in the open air. Sam was all alive and keen with interest, but when they had walked a few steps he glanced at Annie and the expression of his face altered. You be, my word, you be real bad, he said. I am, said Annie hoarsely. I can scarcely speak. It is my sin, Sam, that has found me out. Your sin, said Sam. You be a hangalo. Light. Annie laid her little, white, burning hand on his. I can't go to the docks, she said. I can't go anywhere, except, oh, I must be quick, oh, my senses will go. Everything swims before me. Sam, I must tell you the truth. Sam, hold me for a minute. He did so. The street in which they found themselves was quiet as yet. There were only a few passers-by, and these were hurrying off to their respective employments. Annie put her hand into the little pocket which contained her money. She took out her purse and gave Sam a £5 note. Go, she said, today to Rashley, the place where your sister has been. Go to the rectory and tell them that I, Annie Brooke, have found out the truth of one text. Be sure your sin will find you out. Tell them that from me, and be quick, be very quick. Go at once. But first of all take me to the nearest hospital. Before poor Sam could quite understand all Annie's instructions, the girl herself was quite delirious. There was nothing for it but to lift her into his strong arms and carry her to a large hospital in the neighborhood of Islington. There she was instantly admitted, and, after a very brief delay, was conveyed to the fever ward. Chapter 29. From Darkness to Light. Late on that same evening Rover at the old rectory thought it expedient to raise his voice in the extreme of exasperation and anger. A stranger of the sort that ought not to be seen about the rectory gardens was daring to approach the back door right through Rover's special territory. Luckily for the red-haired giant, Rover could not get at him beyond the limit of his chain. The giant knocked at the back door, and presently a timid-looking woman, who had been called in to help to nurse Mrs. Shelf, opened the door about an inch. Now what is up? She said. You get out of this, you are a stranger here, and we don't want parties of your sort about. I ha come, said Sam, with a message from one as calls herself Annie. Mrs. Shelf was still lying on the sofa in the kitchen. She was feeling far too weak and shaky to rise, but at the name strength seemed to come into her like magic. She tottered off her sofa and approached the door. Whoever you are, come right in, she said. Sam entered and stood gloomily leaning up against the dresser. What is your message? Said Mrs. Shelf. Do tell me quickly. Do you know where Annie Brooke is? In the Great Northern Hospital, said Sam Freeman, where I left her this morning. She said I was to come here and say that her sin had found her out. She gave me £5 to come and give the message. It's a sight too much money. I tuck a third-class ticket down, and, here's the change. He put 3 sovereigns and a pile of silver on the table. I tuck a return ticket, he said. I'll be off, arter given my message. But tell us everything, said Mrs. Shelf. Why, we are just mad to know. Whatever do you mean? Thus abjured, Sam did tell what little he knew. Annie had come back with his sister and a friend of hers to their house the night before, and she had wanted him to help her, and he had arranged to do it. But in the morning she was taken bad, very bad, and lost her head. Only first of all she was able to give him more than enough money to come to Rashley, and a message which he was to convey to the old folks at the rectory. Can't make head nor tail on it, said the giant, for if ever there was a beautiful, evenly creature, it were her. Why, I tack her in these arms to the hospital. Oh, she's like to die. He continued, you'd best go to Annie if ever you want to see her again. And so I will, and this night, too, said Mrs. Shelf. I'll go right along back with you, but first of all I must send a telegraphic message to Mr. John Saxon. In vain the neighbor who had been put in charge of Mrs. Shelf expostulated with her in regard to her madness in going to London. If this is madness, was the sturdy woman's reply, I would rather be mad than sane. Is not his bit lamb in danger and suffering, and am I the one to keep away from her? Sam heard these words without understanding them, but felt immediately inclined to think that Mrs. Shelf was a very good sort. Accordingly, that very same evening Mrs. Shelf and Sam Freeman went up to London by the very train which had taken Annie the night before. When they reached London, however, Mrs. Shelf bade her companion goodbye. I will never cease to thank you as long as I live, she said, and if our Annie, our bit lamb, gets better, you will hear from me. I won't wait for that, ma'am, said Sam. I'll call every day at the hospital to inquire. I can't say no more, there's naught I wouldn't do for her, ma'am. He hurried away, his great shock head towering above most of his fellow men. Mrs. Shelf sighed heavily. At Paddington she got into a four-wheeler and drove straight to the hotel where she knew John Saxon was staying. He was out. She sat down patiently to wait for him. It was past midnight before he returned. What was his amazement to see the worthy, homely face of Mrs. Shelf as she rose from her seat in a corner of the hall of the hotel. I have no news for you, he said. My good soul, why did you come to town? Now this only adds to our complications. I have spent a fearful day, and have put detectives on poor Annie's track, but up to the present we have heard nothing. Then I have news for you, Mr. John. You don't suppose I'd come all the way to London for nothing. And the good woman repeated the astounding intelligence which Sam Freeman had brought her. A message from the child herself, she said, and you can guess from its tone, sir, and the words she used, how bad our poor Annie must be. Oh, may God spare her, and save her life. Spare her and change her, murmured John Saxon. With God all things are possible. I will go at once to the hospital, he said. And you will take me with you, sir? Yes, if you like, but I don't think we can be admitted at this hour. Oh, sir, I couldn't stay away. We must at least have a good try. Haven't I nursed her since she was a little thing, she, who all her days was really motherless? All right, said Saxon. We will go at once. The porter who answered their summons at the great hospital went away immediately to get news with regard to Annie Brooke. This was the reverse of reassuring. She was very ill, quite delirious, and could not possibly be seen until the following morning. Then I will wait here, said Mrs. Shelf, settling herself down determinedly. You can't put me, a woman of my years, into the street. I will go to her when the day breaks. When Saxon and Mrs. Shelf were allowed to visit Annie she did not know them. Her delirium ran high, and for days and weeks she lay truly at the point of death. All that could be done for her was, however, done. She had special nurses and a private ward, and at long last there came a day when, in answer to anguished prayers and bitter sorrow, a girl crept slowly back from the shores of death and lay truly like the shadow of her former self high and dry above danger and on her way to recovery. Day after day, slowly, very slowly, almost imperceptibly, her strength returned, until at last there came an hour when she recognized her old friends. Then by degrees she returned to health and strength. It was 3 months later, and all the events which make up this story seemed to have passed into a distant part of Annie Brooke's life, when she and John Saxon had an earnest talk together. Annie was well once more, but so changed that few would have known her for the laughing and almost beautiful girl of the early part of that same year. She had said very little of the past since her recovery, but on this occasion she made a clean breast of everything to John Saxon. I am sorry, she said. I knew at last what repentance meant when I passed into that awful state of delirium and when I felt myself face to face with an angry God. But I have got something in my nature, John, which makes me tremble for the future. I am very wicked still. What can I do with my life? Then John Saxon made a proposal to her. Will you and Mrs. Shelf and our friend Sam Freeman, who is an excellent fellow at heart and the very person for a colonist, take passage with me to Canada? You can start a new life there, Annie. You have enough money to buy a little land, and Sam Freeman is the very man to help you. I myself will stay near you for the first year, and you can start your Canadian life in the house of a cousin of mine, who, I know, will be only too glad to receive you. In a new country, dear, continued her cousin, one can have a clear horizon, a wider view, a better chance. Take up your cross bravely, Annie. Never forget that you have sinned, but also that you have repented. Do they know at the school? She asked in a whisper. Yes, everything is known, Priscilla told the truth. You won't tell me what they said. There is no need to tell you. Your punishment, perhaps, is not to know. You have done with Mrs. Littleton's school. Turn your face towards the west, dear. Think of the new life and the new, clean, fresh country. Yes, oh yes, I will go, I will go. Then that is settled, said Saxon, and I will make immediate preparations. On the day before Annie sailed to Canada she was seated in a London hotel. All the packing had been done. There were really no farewells to make. Mabel Lushington had never written to her from the day she had left Zermatt. Lady Lushington had doubtless also forgotten her existence. Her school friends, if they thought of Annie Brooke at all, must think of her as one whose name should be spoken with bated breath, who was deceitful, who had gone far astray, and who had finally left her native land because it was best for her to turn her back on England. There was no one for Annie to say farewell to, unless indeed, Priscilla Weir. But she and Priscilla had never been real friends, and was it likely that Priscilla would think of her now? It made her head ache, for she was not nearly as strong as before her illness, even to try to remember Priscilla. She pressed her hand to her forehead. She and John Saxon and her other friends were to start early on the following day. Just at that moment the room door was opened. The light had not yet been turned on. The days were a little dusky. A tall girl came hurriedly forward. She came straight up to Annie where she sat, dropped on one knee, and took one of her little, cold hands. Annie Brooke, she said, I am Priscilla. Have you nothing to say to me? Annie looked at her, at first with a sort of terror, then with a softened expression in her blue eyes, then all of a sudden they kindled, there was a smile round her lips and a radiation spread itself over her wan little face. She flung her arms round Priscilla. Oh, did you know I was going? Have you come to say goodbye? I only heard it today from Mr. Saxon, said Priscilla. Yes, I have come to kiss you, and to tell you that I, in spite of everything, love you. You can't, said Annie. You don't know. I know everything, Annie. Annie, we have both been in deep waters, we have both sinned, and God has forgiven us both. I am going away, said Annie restlessly. When I am in another country I won't hear that awful text echoing so often. What text, Annie? Be sure your sin will find you out. But it did find you out, said Priscilla, and that was the very best thing that could have happened, because then you turned to God, you could not help yourself, and God, who is infinite in his compassion, forgave you. Oh, do you think so, do you think so? Said Annie, beginning to sob. Prisky, I promised him, my angel uncle, my more than father, to meet him in the home where he is now. Oh Prisky, can I? You will meet him, said Priscilla, with conviction. But, Prisky, do you quite know everything? Annie, as she spoke, still kept her arms round Priscilla's neck, and her words were whispered in Priscilla's ears. Do you know all about Susan Martin and the poems? Yes, said Priscilla, I know. Mr. Manchuri is going to help Susan, only, if possible, I should like to have the manuscript book back. I sent it back to Susan herself with a letter. I did that today, said Annie. It seemed the very last thing left, the final drop in my cup of humiliation. I am so glad, said Priscilla. Mr. Manchuri will help Susan. She is going to be educated, and will give up dressmaking. Who is Mr. Manchuri? I seem to know his name and yet to have forgotten him, said Annie. Oh Annie, dear Annie. He belongs to my story. He took me home that time from Interlaken, and I resemble a girl of his who died, and since then, ever since then, I have been living with him and looking after him, and he has finally arranged that I am always to stay with him as his adopted daughter. I am not going to school anymore, but I am being taught, oh, in many and wonderful ways, by my dear, dear friend Mr. Manchuri himself, by the beautiful picture of the girl who went to God and whom I am supposed to resemble. And I have books as many as I want, and, oh, I, who have sinned too, am happy, very happy. And what about Mabel? Said Annie. Lady Lushington knows all about Mabel. Everybody knows about everything, Annie. Mabel is to stay at a school in Paris for a year. It is a good thing for her, too, that things have been found out, Annie. I don't think you need fear that text anymore. You comfort me, said Annie. Oh, sometimes, Priscilla, when you pray to God, ask Him to give me a clean heart, and to renew a right spirit within me. The end.